The tree does not cling to its fruit. It lets go when the time comes. In the natural world, nothing holds on forever. A tree spends months nurturing a single fruit, drawing nourishment from the soil, standing firm against the wind, sheltering it from the rain, only to release it the moment it ripens. It does not beg the fruit to remain. It does not fear the emptiness that will follow. It lets go because that is simply the way of things. Human beings, on the other hand, struggle with this deeply. We cling to relationships that have long since soured, to work that no longer stirs the soul, to identities that no longer fit the shape of who we are becoming. Letting go feels like failure, yet nature teaches a different wisdom. Release is not abandonment. Release is growth. The tree does not lose the fruit. It fulfills its purpose the very moment it allows the fruit to fall. There is pain in detachment, but only because we confuse possession with love. The tree still nourishes, the tree still stands, but it knows that clinging would only rot the fruit upon the branch. The same applies to moments, to people, to beliefs. When we grip too tightly, we bruise what was once beautiful, and we suffer. Not because things end, but because we resist their ending. I am Damian Blackwood, and this is The Dark Mind, where we listen to the old teachings that the modern world has almost forgotten and let them settle into the quiet places within us. Letting go at the right time is not weakness. It is strength disguised as surrender. It means trusting the cycle. It means believing that what falls away is quietly making space for something new. That emptiness is not a void, but an invitation. The tree does not fall apart when the fruit drops. It prepares to bloom again. Some things are meant to be released. Some seasons ask for soft hands, not tight fists. And just like the tree, wisdom means knowing when the time has come. Holding on too long turns nourishment into decay, but letting go at just the right moment allows something else to take root, silently, invisibly, and yet powerfully. The quieter the drum, the deeper its echo in the forest of thought. In a world addicted to noise, silence becomes a rare form of rebellion. The quiet drum does not fight for attention. It does not scream to be heard. And yet its subtle rhythm travels further, resonates deeper, and lingers longer in the minds of those who truly listen. There is a strange power in restraint, in not trying to impress, in letting presence speak louder than volume ever could. True influence does not always come from shouting opinions or dominating conversations. It rises out of the kind of stillness that unsettles and awakens, the kind that cuts through chaos like a blade through smoke. When someone speaks slowly, thoughtfully, deliberately, their words carve through the noise and settle like dust in the quiet corners of the mind, impossible to ignore. That is what the quieter drum does. It does not strike often, but when it does, the entire forest listens. The same applies to thought. The loudest thoughts, those swollen with panic, craving, and fear, drown out the real insight. But when the mind softens, when it stops trying to control or predict or chase, a deeper echo begins to rise. An intuition, a truth not manufactured but uncovered. This is not the kind of echo that fades. It returns again and again, reminding, whispering, waking something ancient inside. The ego wants volume. The ego wants recognition. But wisdom walks barefoot through the mind. It does not announce itself. It stirs slowly, and only those quiet enough to notice will feel its ripple. The quieter the drum, the less it needs to prove, and paradoxically, the more it moves. In the end, the deepest changes in a person's life do not begin with shouting. They begin with a whisper that refuses to leave. Drink your tea slowly and reverently, as if it were the axis on which the world spins. There is a kind of sacredness hidden in the mundane, and tea holds it quietly in its warmth. When one drinks it slowly, not to quench thirst, not to kill time, but to be fully present, the world itself begins to shift. Each sip becomes a ceremony. Each breath between tastes becomes a prayer. The chaos outside pauses, not because it disappears, but because it no longer owns the moment. The problem is not that life is too fast. The problem is that attention is too scattered. People eat while scrolling. They speak while already composing their reply. They live while imagining what is coming next. But the tea has no future and no past. It exists only in the now. And if the entire universe could be poured into a single cup, it would ask one thing in return: be here completely. To drink tea reverently is to bow to simplicity. The hand that holds the cup becomes still. The thoughts soften like the steam rising from the surface. In that moment, nothing is missing. There is no chase, no performance, no proving. There is only being, and that is enough. It is not about the tea. It is about the slowness, the intimacy, the quiet decision to treat something ordinary as extraordinary. Reverence is not reserved for temples. It is available in the way the cup touches the lip, in the way the warmth travels down the throat, in the way the body sighs without asking permission. The world spins on many illusions, but presence is not one of them. And when the act of drinking becomes an act of devotion, even the smallest moment becomes holy. In that silence, where nothing is demanded and everything is felt, life becomes full. So full, in fact, that nothing else is needed. To walk without leaving a trace is the highest form of presence. True presence does not announce itself. It does not crave applause or proof. It arrives, it lives, and it departs without disturbing the surface of the world. And yet, somehow, its absence is deeply felt. To walk without leaving a trace is not to be invisible. It is to move through life so gently, so consciously, that nothing is harmed by your passing. Not the people, not the places, not even the silence itself. Most live loudly, leaving heavy marks behind them. Regrets, resentments, possessions, judgments. There is a restless urge to be remembered, to be noticed, to make a dent in the world. But the ancient wisdom says otherwise. It whispers that the greatest impact is not forceful, it is seamless. Like wind moving through the trees, like moonlight resting on water, like a footprint in the snow that melts before anyone even notices it was there. To walk without a trace is to love without controlling, to give without attaching, to speak without wounding. It is the art of disappearing into the very act of living without carving your name into every surface. It means not needing to be the center, right? Not needing to own what cannot be kept. Presence in its purest form is selfless. It is the ability to be fully here, fully engaged, while asking for nothing in return. It is the teacher who leaves no ego in the lesson, the parent who raises without binding, the guest who leaves a room lighter than they found it. That is the kind of presence that lingers, not in memory, but in the energy left behind. This is not erasure, it is refinement. It is the discipline of stepping softly through the world, knowing that everything you touch is alive. And when your time is over, the world remains whole, perhaps even more so, because you were gentle enough to pass through it without taking more than you gave. A still pond reflects the stars more clearly than a rushing stream. Clarity is not found in movement, but in stillness. The stars are always there, brilliant and ancient, yet they do not reveal themselves to waters that never rest. A rushing stream may be alive, powerful, dramatic, but it cannot mirror the sky. Its surface is too restless, its rhythm too loud. Only the pond, in its quiet surrender, becomes a perfect mirror. Only in stillness does the truth appear without distortion. The same applies to the mind. When thoughts race, when emotions churn, when the heart is caught in urgency, even the brightest insights remain hidden. But when the mind settles, truly settles, reality reveals itself. Not as something new, but as something that has always been there, waiting. Peace is not an achievement. It is what remains when the noise is no longer fed. People are taught to chase clarity, to analyze, to solve, to grasp. Yet the ancient lesson teaches a different path. Stop. Wait. Breathe. Allow the mind to release its grasping for understanding, and understanding begins to emerge on its own. Like stars that appear only when the sky grows dark enough. Like truths that whisper rather than shout. A still pond does not force the reflection, it simply allows it. It offers no resistance. That is the secret. Not to conquer the chaos, but to stop reacting to it. To be so present that nothing needs to be added or changed. And in that silence, the reflection becomes perfect. Stillness is not weakness. It is precision. It is patience. It is the quiet strength to remain calm in a world that screams for motion. The stars do not change. The truth does not vanish. Only those willing to stop moving can see how brilliantly it has always been shining. The wound is where the teaching enters, not where the story ends. There is a certain kind of pain that does not simply hurt. It shatters. It does not knock politely. It barges in, wrecking everything familiar. And when it is finished, it leaves behind a silence so loud it echoes. In that silence, most believe the story ends, that the heartbreak, the betrayal, the failure, the loss, whatever carved the wound, was the final chapter. But that is not where it ends. That is where it begins. For the wound is not merely a scar waiting to fade. It is an opening, a doorway, and through it, something sacred tries to enter. Human beings, on the other hand, spend years covering their pain as though it were shameful. They numb it, outrun it, decorate it with distractions. But wounds do not disappear simply because they are ignored. They wait quietly until one day something cracks, and then they speak. And when they do, they teach, not with words, but with truths too honest to deny. They reveal what mattered, what broke, what never healed, and what desperately wishes to grow. Some of the wisest souls carry the deepest wounds, not because they deserved the pain, but because they allowed it to transform them. They did not stop at the hurt. They let it humble them, open them, guide them. And in doing so, they discovered that pain is not proof of weakness. It is evidence of depth. When the wound is still fresh, it is difficult to believe that anything good could ever come from it. But over time, when the screaming quiets and the soul stops resisting, something unexpected happens. The pain becomes a compass, and the very thing that once seemed to ruin everything becomes the seed of everything worthwhile. The wound does not close the book. It tears open the page life has been waiting to write. And in that rawness, in that unbearable honesty, the real lesson begins. Not in spite of the wound, but through it. Speak only when the words are better than silence. Otherwise, hold them in reverence. Words carry weight. They cut, they heal, they echo. Yet most are thrown carelessly, like stones tossed into still water, without thought for the ripples they cause. The ancient ones knew this, that silence is not emptiness. It is a sacred space. And every time it is broken, it should be for something that matters. Not to fill the air, not to be heard, but to bring truth, or beauty, or peace. To speak only when words are better than silence is not to be passive. It is to be precise. It means resisting the urge to fix with advice, to impress with noise, to defend with reaction. It means allowing stillness to linger, even when it is uncomfortable, because silence is often the only honest answer. Speech, when held in reverence, becomes an offering rather than a weapon. It is not used to dominate or decorate, but to connect, to bring understanding where there was confusion, to offer calm pain. And when that cannot be done, silence is wiser. The more one speaks, the more diluted their meaning becomes. But when someone speaks rarely and with care, their voice is heard like thunder. For it is not frequency that gives words their power. It is intention. It is restraint. It is the ability to feel a thought rise and choose to let it pass. Holding words in reverence is an act of humility. It means accepting that silence is often more generous than speech. Not every thought deserves a voice. Wisdom is not measured by how much one says, but by what is left unsaid. In the end, the words that change lives are never loud. They arrive slowly, like falling leaves, disturbing nothing, and in their wake, the silence grows even deeper. A shadow does not grow larger when feared. It only blocks more light. Fear has a strange way of distorting what is real. What begins as a faint shadow, a passing worry, a quiet unease, suddenly stretches and swells the moment it is noticed. Yet the shadow itself has not changed. It does not grow on its own. It expands only in the mind, fed by the attention it is given. Fear does not empower the shadow. It empowers the illusion. The more it is feared, the more light it hides, until all that remains is a darkness that was never truly there. People often mistake shadows for threats. They see uncertainty and call it danger. They see discomfort and name it doom. And so they avoid the shadow, turn from it, run from it, hide from it, never realizing that this act alone gives it weight. But a shadow has no substance. It cannot touch. It cannot harm. It only blocks vision. And when it is feared, it does not become stronger. It only covers more of the light that was always present. The tragedy is not the presence of the shadow. It is what gets missed because of it. Joy, clarity, connection, all of them dim, not because they have vanished, but because the shadow has been given center stage. The mind becomes a theater for fear, and the longer the spotlight lingers on the shadow, the longer light stays out of reach. Yet the moment attention shifts, the moment the fear is met, named, and looked upon honestly, the illusion breaks. The shadow shrinks, not because it was destroyed, but because the light was finally allowed back in. It was never about defeating the shadow. It was about refusing to give it more space than it deserves. Fear does not change the shape of the shadow. It only blinds the one who watches. And the more the light is feared, the more of that light is blocked. True wisdom is knowing when not to act. The world celebrates the doer, the one who charges forward, solves problems, conquers, builds, fights. Stillness, on the other hand, is often mistaken for weakness. But true wisdom lives in restraint. It is not always the one who moves first who is strongest, but the one who understands that sometimes doing nothing is the most powerful choice of all. Not acting is not the same as avoiding. It is not fear. It is the ability to see the fire and refuse to pour on it either water or gasoline. It is recognizing that not every storm must be chased, not every insult must be answered, not every discomfort must be solved. There are moments when the wisest path is to pause, to wait, to allow things to unfold without interference. That kind of discipline looks like inaction, but it is a decision carved from deep understanding. There is a silence that speaks volumes, a stillness that shakes the foundations more than any flurry of reaction ever could. It takes maturity to hold back when everything inside screams to respond. It takes clarity to see that time can resolve what panic only complicates. And it takes courage to resist the illusion that control is always found in action. Wisdom is not about knowing what to do. It is about knowing when not to. When stepping back creates space for truth. When silence reveals more than explanation. When patience becomes sharper than any blade. The fool leaps at every chance to prove himself. The wise wait for the moment when action will actually matter. To not act is often the loudest form of presence. It says, I see what is happening. I understand the pull, but I trust something deeper. And in that trust, everything begins to settle into its rightful place. Even the most skilled hunter bows to the rhythm of the season. Mastery gives the illusion of control. The skilled believe their craft can bend time, that their precision can outwit nature. But the seasons do not bow to talent. They do not rush for hunger, nor pause for ambition. Even the finest hunter, the one who knows every trail, every whisper in the wind, must wait. Because no matter how sharp the aim or how steady the hand, the forest moves to a rhythm that cannot be commanded. There is an ancient wisdom in knowing when not to act. A hunter may wake with hunger, polish his tools, and walk the familiar paths. But if the forest is still, if the prey has vanished into the folds of winter or the silence of the breeding time, there is nothing to do but listen. Wait. Watch. And in that stillness, the hunter is humbled. Not by failure, but by the truth that life unfolds on a clock older than any human plan. Modern life forgets this rhythm. It worships constant motion. Productivity is mistaken for purpose, and waiting is confused with weakness. But those who understand nature, truly understand it, know that every season has its role. There are seasons to gather and seasons to rest, seasons to hunt and seasons to sit in silence beside an empty path. The wise do not force the forest. They learn to breathe with it. Bowing to the season is not surrender. It is alignment. It is realizing that some forces are not obstacles but teachers. And in waiting for the right time, the skilled hunter becomes something greater than skilled. He becomes timeless. Because true mastery is not about control. It is about reverence. It is about knowing that the world has its own pace. And sometimes the highest wisdom is to pause and let the season speak. The fish in the net still believes it is swimming free. There is a kind of illusion more dangerous than chains. It is the illusion of freedom. The fish tangled in the net still moves, still turns, still flicks its tail. It feels motion and mistakes it for liberty. But every movement is contained, every choice is bounded, and it does not realize that what feels like freedom is only the room it has been given inside a trap. Human beings live in much the same way, convinced they are free because they can choose between two jobs, two brands, two opinions, yet they rarely question the net itself, the system, the beliefs, the invisible rules that shape those options. They say what they are permitted to say. They dream within acceptable limits, and still they call it freedom. The most dangerous cages are the ones dressed in the softness of comfort, the routines, the endless scrolling, the roles handed down silently by family, by culture, by fear. People swim through their days believing they are in control, never noticing that every current is pulling them toward a shore they did not choose. They feel busy, they feel active, they may even feel important, but movement is not the same as liberation. This is why awakening carries such pain, for it does not offer new answers. It exposes the trap, it reveals the net, and once it is seen, it cannot be unseen. You begin to notice how often your thoughts are not truly your own, how often you say yes when you meant no, how often your life has become a performance staged for someone who is not even watching. Freedom does not begin with action, but with awareness. The fish cannot tear through the net until it realizes it has been caught. And the moment you begin to question what you have always accepted, something shifts within you. The water feels different, the silence grows louder, and suddenly the movements you once called freedom feel small, rehearsed, hollow. That is where real choice begins. A fool rushes to win the war. The wise find a way not to enter the battle. There is a thrill in the clash, a seductive pride that comes from charging headlong into conflict. The fool sees opposition as a test of strength, a chance to dominate, to prove something to himself and to others. And so he prepares his weapons, sharpens his tongue, and steps into every confrontation as if victory itself will grant him peace. But peace never arrives through war. It arrives through the understanding of how not to need one. The wise know this in their bones. That is why they rarely fight. Battles are not always waged upon battlefields. They erupt in relationships, in boardrooms, in daily exchanges disguised as arguments, ego games, and subtle struggles for power. The fool, driven by impulse, plunges in. He mistakes reaction for courage and believes that being loud makes him right. But the wise do not rush. They listen longer than they speak. They see the trap hidden behind the bait. They ask not, "Can I win this?" but "Should I even be here at all?" Avoiding the fight is not cowardice. It is clarity. It is the recognition that not every hill is worth dying upon, and not every opponent is truly an enemy. Often the greatest victory is to walk away without ever drawing a sword. The wise seek harmony, not because they fear resistance, but because they understand the cost of unnecessary war, the burned bridges, the poisoned minds, the sleepless nights. They know that every battle leaves scars behind, even the ones that are won. Real power lies in restraint, in choosing silence when provoked, in walking away from insults that do not deserve your energy, in solving the problem rather than feeding the fire. The fool seeks to win the moment. The wise protect the greater picture. For while the fool builds his identity upon battles, the wise build their legacy upon peace. And history always remembers who truly avoided the war, not who shouted the loudest. You do not need to chase the moon to feel its light. The moon gives freely. It asks for nothing in return. It does not demand pursuit, nor does it hide from those who stand still. And yet people run toward success, toward validation, toward some distant promise of peace, as though joy must be earned through exhaustion. But the most luminous things in life cannot be chased. They can only be received. There is a deep madness in the belief that worth is found in striving, that something more must always be done, that rest is laziness, stillness is failure, and happiness always waits somewhere else. But the moon has never quickened its pace to impress anyone. It simply rises, night after night, and those who take the time to look up are bathed in its quiet glow. To feel the light, one must stop running. That is the paradox. Chasing the moon will only leave you breathless and in the dark, always one step behind. But standing still, present, open, unguarded, that is where the light finds you. The same is true of love. of clarity, of peace. They do not come to those who chase them. They come to those who are ready to feel them. Modern life tells a different story. Be faster, work harder, earn your rest. But ancient wisdom knew better. The things that matter most, truth, connection, inner freedom, are not won by force. They are noticed in the quiet. They are felt in the pauses. They arrive when the noise dies down and the heart softens enough to receive. You do not need to chase the moon. You only need to pause long enough to notice that it is already shining upon your skin, already offering its light, already here. And in that realization, the desperate search comes to an end. The light was never distant. It was waiting for stillness all along. Patience is the art of watching the fruit ripen without tearing it from the branch. There is a quiet agony in waiting, especially when the reward seems just within reach. The fruit is there, visible, full, tempting. It is easy to justify reaching for it too soon, convincing yourself it is good enough or that tomorrow it may be too late. But true patience is restraint wedded to wisdom. It is trusting the process over the impulse. The fruit, if torn away too early, tastes only of bitterness. But when it is left to ripen fully, it falls into your hands with grace. No force, no regret, only readiness. In life, people so often rush. They chase after answers, outcomes, people, dreams, tugging at branches that are not yet ready to give. And in that haste, they bruise what was meant to blossom. They sabotage what could have grown whole. For patience is not merely waiting, it is knowing how to wait. It is a discipline, not a delay, a quiet belief that all things unfold best when they are allowed their time. The impatient mind asks, when, while the patient heart whispers, let it be. There is a sacred stillness in allowing life to mature on its own terms. It means remaining rooted while the unseen work unfolds. It means trusting that what is meant for you is not ripening away from you. It is ripening toward you, and it will not arrive a moment too late. The greatest acts of love, of creation, of growth cannot be hurried. A relationship forced too soon withers. A decision made too quickly falters. A dream pushed too hard collapses beneath its own weight. But the one who waits with care, who watches without grasping, who supports without pressing, becomes part of something deeper than desire. Such a soul aligns with timing rather than resisting it. For patience is not passive, it is powerful. It says, I am ready whenever it is right. And when the moment comes, the fruit does not need to be taken. It gives itself freely. The eye that sees everything forgets how to see within. There is a kind of blindness born from seeing too much. The eye that constantly scans the horizon, that hungers for more sights, more knowledge, more stimulation, eventually loses touch with what lies behind it. It sees the world in vivid detail, its trends, its dramas, its flaws, yet it no longer perceives the soul behind the seeing. The gaze becomes a spotlight that never turns inward, and in that relentless outward focus, the self begins to fade. Modern life feeds this imbalance. Screens glow with endless images, news cycles demand attention, and comparison becomes a daily ritual. The mind is flooded with information, but the heart is starved of reflection. One becomes an expert in the lives of others, yet a stranger to one's own. The noise outside grows louder, while the inner voice, once clear and grounding, grows faint. The tragedy is subtle because the eye still functions. It still captures beauty and sorrow and movement. But without the inward gaze, it loses meaning. It sees, yet it does not understand. It captures, yet it does not connect. The mirror is polished, yet the soul behind it lies dust-covered and forgotten. To see within is not to turn away from the world. It is to reorient the gaze. It is to pause, to close the floodgates, and to ask, who is the one behind all this watching? What do I feel? What do I need? What am I avoiding by always looking outward? The eye that sees everything is powerful, but power without self-awareness is hollow. Insight does not dwell in the spectacle, it dwells in silence. And when the gaze finally turns inward, when the watcher becomes the watched, something ancient stirs. Not a new vision, but a remembering. The kind of seeing that heals rather than merely observes. A cracked bowl still holds the warmth of the soup. Perfection is a myth that has broken more people than any flaw ever could. There is a quiet lie whispered by the world, that only the unbroken are worthy, that only the flawless are useful, that only the untouched can be loved. Yet the truth is quieter still and far more enduring. It may not look the way it once did. It may carry lines from what it has endured, but it holds, it serves, it nourishes. And in that, it proves something essential. Function does not vanish with imperfection. Everyone carries cracks, losses that left marks, choices that haunt, traumas stitched beneath smiles. And yet there is this aching tendency to hide them, to apologize for them, to believe they disqualify you from giving or receiving anything meaningful. But the warmth still remains, even when chipped, even when uneven, even when you fear someone might notice where it broke. The beauty is not in pretending the crack is not there. It is in realizing that it never took away your purpose. The bowl does not have to be whole to be worthy. It only needs to hold, just enough to carry warmth, to offer comfort, to let someone sip something real from it. The crack does not define it. It tells a story. In some cultures, they fill broken pottery with gold, not to hide the fracture, but to honor it, to show that the break is not the end of value, but the beginning of character. The same is true of people. The warmth others feel from you does not come from how perfect you are. It comes from how deeply you have lived, how fiercely you have endured, how gently you still offer yourself despite it all. For sometimes, the cracked bowl is the one that is chosen again and again, not in spite of its cracks, but because of them. Do not mistake motion for growth. Some weeds grow faster than trees. Movement is seductive. It feels like progress, like purpose, like power. But not all motion is meaningful. Not all growth is good. Weeds burst through the soil with speed, spreading quickly, overtaking spaces meant for something deeper. Trees, by contrast, grow slowly, quietly beneath the earth before rising above it. Their strength is built in patience, not in performance. The modern world worships speed, fast results, instant gratification, rapid success. People hustle, pivot, climb, and when they move quickly, they believe they are evolving. Yet often they are merely reacting, chasing, spinning. It feels like growth, but it is often only escape. A desperate attempt to avoid the stillness where true transformation demands to be met. Some of the most broken patterns wear the costume of ambition. Some of the most toxic habits feel productive. Working without rest, helping everyone but yourself, saying yes to everything. These grow like weeds, quick, loud, impressive at first glance, but they crowd out the deeper roots. They rob the soil. They leave you hollow and exhausted. True growth does not always look like success. Sometimes it looks like slowing down, saying no, sitting with discomfort instead of distracting yourself from it, releasing what is easy in order to build what is lasting. The tree does not rush toward the sky. It anchors itself in the darkness first, and when the storm comes, it stands. The weed, though swift, is fragile. Growth is not measured by how much you do. It is about what you are becoming. A person can be busy and empty, successful and lost, surrounded and lonely. Motion means nothing without direction, and direction, depth. So pause. Ask what is truly growing in your life, roots or weeds, substance or show. Not everything that moves is progress. Some things must slow down in order to truly rise. The softest touch leaves the deepest impression. There is a power that does not shout. It does not demand attention or leave trails of destruction behind. It does not bruise, nor does it dominate. It simply arrives, quietly, gently, and alters everything. The softest touch, so often overlooked, carries a weight that lingers long after it has gone. A kind word offered at the right moment, a glance filled with understanding, a hand resting lightly upon a shoulder when no words will do. These are the moments that carve themselves into memory, not with force, but with depth. The world often rewards the loud, the aggressive, the bold. Yet the deepest changes rarely come from volume. They come from presence. A voice lowered rather than raised. A gesture made with care rather than control. These are the actions that slip past every defense and reach the very center of a person's heart. They are not remembered because they were grand. They are remembered because they were real, because they did not need to prove anything in order to be felt. People carry wounds from harshness, but they heal through gentleness. A soft touch does not mean weakness. It means precision. It means knowing exactly where to press, how long to remain, and when to withdraw. It means sensing what cannot be mended by force. Some doors do not open with keys. They open with patience, with trust, with tenderness. And the irony is this: what is soft often leaves the most permanent mark. Not the slap, but the embrace. Not the command, but the whisper. The softest touch is not about how much pressure is applied. It is about how deeply it is received. And when someone recalls a moment that changed them, it is rarely the noise they remember. It is the silence, the softness, the gentle presence that reached them in ways no thunder ever could. The river bends not because it is weak, but because it is wise. Strength is so often confused with resistance, with pushing forward, standing firm, refusing to yield. But the river teaches a different kind of power. It bends, it curves, it twists its path through rock and root and mountain. Not because it is fragile, but because it understands that rigidity breaks where flexibility endures. The river yields, and in doing so, it outlasts stone. In a world obsessed with force, surrender looks like failure. People are taught to push through, to dominate obstacles, to never step back. Yet some paths cannot be broken through. Some walls only fall when one flows around them. The river does not waste itself fighting what it can simply move beyond. That is not weakness. That is ancient intelligence. To bend is to adapt without losing yourself, to shift course without abandoning purpose. The river still reaches the sea. It never forgets where it is going, but it honors the terrain. It listens. It changes shape instead of resisting shape. That is the kind of strength that does not burn out. It deepens with every turn. People suffer because they mistake stubbornness for integrity. They cling tightly to plans, to pride, to control. But when life throws sharp corners and steep drops, it is not the strongest who survive. It is the most fluid. Those who know how to bend without breaking, how to move without losing themselves. There is wisdom, and there is softness, in choosing grace over force. The river could rage, yet instead it sings. It could carve through violence, yet instead it smooths with time. It teaches that the most powerful path is not the one that conquers, but the one that understands. To bend is not to give in. It is to see clearly, to move wisely, to trust that arriving is not about straight lines. It is about staying in motion without losing your soul. An empty hand can hold more than one that grasps. Grasping feels safe. There is comfort in clinging to possessions, to people, to plans. The closed fist becomes a symbol of control, of having, of keeping. Yet the tighter it closes, the less room remains for anything new. The fingers curl inward, and in that tension, life stops flowing. An empty hand, by contrast, looks vulnerable, exposed, but that openness is its very strength, for only when the hand is empty can it truly receive. This is one of the most misunderstood truths in life. The world teaches accumulation. Gather more, grip harder, secure what you can before it slips away. But this mindset turns hands into cages. Love becomes possession, dreams become desperation, and identity grows tangled with what one cannot release. Yet the more tightly something is held, the more fragile it becomes. Even water slips through clenched fingers. The empty hand is not a sign of lack. It is a sign of readiness. It says, I trust that what is meant for me will arrive, and I do not need to choke the life out of it to keep it here. In its openness, the hand becomes a vessel, not only for receiving, but for offering, for connecting, for holding space without crushing what it touches. True richness is not found in the grasp. It is found in the freedom to let go and still feel whole. For when the hand is open, it can hold more than things. It can hold peace. It can hold presence. It can hold the weight of another hand in need. And most importantly, it can hold the wisdom that having nothing to grip may sometimes mean having everything that truly matters. True wealth is the absence of craving. Most people believe wealth is something that can be counted, measured in coins, homes, achievements, admiration. But the ancients whispered a different truth, that real wealth lies not in what you possess, but in what you no longer need. The richest person is not the one with the most, but the one who desires the least. Craving is a quiet thief. It disguises itself as ambition, as self-improvement, as love. Yet beneath the surface, it is a hunger that never rests. You feed it with success, and it asks for more. You offer it attention, and it demands louder applause. It turns even the sweetest moments bitter, for they are never enough. A mind caught in craving cannot enjoy what it already holds. It is always reaching, always leaning forward, always starving. The one who has tamed desire walks differently. There is a stillness in them, a quiet presence. Their joy does not spike and crash. It hums. They do not chase status, for their worth is not borrowed from others. They do not fear loss, for they were not gripping anything too tightly to begin with. Their wealth lives in contentment, not in accumulation. Craving is exhausting. It keeps you running toward mirages. But the moment you cease chasing, something strange unfolds. You notice that you are already standing in the oasis. You taste food differently. You breathe more deeply. You laugh without need. That is the wealth that cannot be stolen or measured. It is not in the car, the title, the trophy. It lives in the unshakable realization that nothing is missing. To be free of craving is to be at peace in the middle of chaos. To wake without needing more. To feel the sun upon your skin and know that it is enough. True wealth is not stored in banks or boxes. It dwells in the quiet spaces between desires. And once it is found, no storm can touch it. He who listens learns twice. There is a kind of quiet intelligence that does not need to speak first, does not rush to respond, does not interrupt to prove that it knows. It simply listens deeply, not only to words but to tone, to silence, to what is hidden between sentences. In that stillness, something powerful takes place. The listener learns what is being said and also learns how and why it is being said. One lesson comes from the surface, the other from beneath it. That is why the one who truly listens learns twice. Most people do not truly listen. They wait. They wait for a gap in which to speak, a moment to defend, a pause in which to insert their opinion. Their ears are open, but their mind is occupied, planning, judging, reacting. Real listening is different. It suspends the ego. It makes space. It forgets itself for a moment to absorb another's truth. And that space becomes a classroom. Every sentence a clue. Every pause an opportunity. Listening does not merely gather facts. It builds empathy. It reveals motives, fears, hopes, the quiet architecture behind every story. When someone feels heard, they open. They reveal more. They trust. And suddenly, the listener is no longer merely collecting knowledge. They are connecting to the experience behind it. There is wisdom that cannot be taught, only caught. It drifts through conversation like smoke, easy to miss, yet undeniable if you are still enough to feel it. The one who listens learns what happened and who it happened to. They learn the lesson and the life behind it. And in that doubled learning, they become not only wiser, but safer. Safer to speak with, safer to trust. For people always remember who truly listened. Speaking may prove what one knows, but listening reveals what one is ready to become. And the ear, humble and open, is often the sharpest teacher of them all. The path is not to be found, it is to be walked. So many wait for a sign, for a perfect map, for a feeling of certainty before they move. They search endlessly for purpose, for direction, for a life that feels right. Yet the truth is harder to swallow and more liberating to realize. The path is not something you discover. It is something you create with every step you take. There is no hidden trail waiting to be uncovered by the worthy. No perfect plan buried beneath the chaos of life. The myth of finding your path has paralyzed multitudes, for they wait, they analyze, they hesitate, hoping the fog will clear before they begin. Yet the fog only lifts as you move through it. The path takes shape because you walked. The ancient ones understood this. They did not wait for certainty. They acted, stumbled, learned, adjusted. They did not ask, "Is this my destiny?" They asked, "What can I do today?" with courage. Each decision, each risk, each lesson became the path. It was not found, it was forged. Hesitation feels safe, but it is the most dangerous trap of all. For in waiting for the right path, you give your life away in inches. You trade motion for imagining. You stare at a closed door while your soul grows restless behind it. Yet once you begin, even if you are unsure, the road unfolds. It speaks back, it teaches, and step by step, the ground beneath your feet becomes sacred. You do not need more clarity to begin. You need more trust in your ability to shape meaning as you move. The path will never appear fully paved. It responds to your presence, your action, your willingness to walk without knowing the destination. And in doing so, you discover something deeper. The journey was never about reaching a place. It was about becoming someone who walks. A single candle can light 1,000 more without losing itself. There is something profoundly beautiful in the quiet generosity of a flame. A single candle burning steady in the dark can touch another wick, and another, until the whole room is glowing. And yet, in all this giving, the original flame does not weaken. It does not shrink. It remains whole, untouched in its power, even as it shares everything. This is not merely about fire. It is about the human spirit. People often live as though light were limited, as though kindness were a resource to be rationed, love something to be protected, wisdom a secret to be guarded. There is this subtle fear that by giving too much, something essential will be lost, that if one gives their energy, their care, their support, they will burn out. But light does not work that way. Neither does truth. Neither does love. When a candle lights another, it does not divide itself. It multiplies its impact. It becomes the reason others glow. This is how change spreads. This is how healing begins. Not with grand gestures, but with quiet acts of presence. One person showing up. One voice offering comfort. One small act of goodness sparking another. The flame is not afraid of the darkness. It knows the dark has no substance, only absence. And so it gives freely, calmly, without condition. The more it shares, the more powerful it becomes. Not because it grows larger, but because it awakens light everywhere it touches. And those who learn to live in this way, unafraid to give, unafraid to shine, become something rare. They carry warmth into cold places. They remind others of what is possible. And long after they are gone, their light remains. For real impact is not about how brightly one burns for oneself. It is about how many flames one dares to ignite. The mirror that is never cleaned forgets what it reflects. A mirror's purpose is simple, to reflect what is. Yet over time, if left untouched, dust gathers, fingerprints smudge, and the surface grows dull. Eventually, it shows less of the truth and more of the grime. What was once an instrument of clarity becomes a distorted surface, reflecting shadows instead of substance. And the mirror, though still present, forgets its purpose, not because it is broken, but because it has been neglected. The human mind works in the same way. Born with the ability to perceive truth, to reflect on life with clarity, compassion, and wisdom, it slowly gathers the residue of noise. Old beliefs, unresolved pain, constant distraction, unchecked thoughts, all these build up like dust upon glass. And without inner cleansing, without silence, without reflection, the mind forgets what it was meant to see. It becomes reactive, clouded, lost. The tragedy is a quiet one. A person moves through life convinced they see clearly, when in truth, every image is being filtered through layers of distortion. Judgment replaces understanding. Fear clouds joy. The past warps the present. And soon, the self that once knew how to reflect light becomes a surface for old stories to repeat themselves. But cleaning the mirror is always possible. It does not require perfection, only presence. Only the willingness to pause and see what is actually being reflected, and to ask whether it is still true. Meditation, honesty, rest, stillness. These are the cloths that restore the shine. Not by adding anything new, but by removing what never belonged. A mirror does not need to invent the light. It only needs to remain clean enough to let it pass through. And when it does, the reflection returns, not as something you create, but remember, a clarity that was always there, waiting to be revealed. The deepest cave often holds the clearest sound. There is something haunting about depth, something both terrifying and magnetic. People fear it because it is dark, quiet, unknown. Yet that depth, that silence, that stillness does not merely swallow sound. It perfects it. In the deepest caves, where the air is untouched and the world above falls away, even the softest whisper echoes like truth. There, sound is stripped of noise. Nothing muffles it. Nothing competes with it. It becomes pure, honest, undeniable. The deeper the cave, the clearer the echo. The same holds true of people. Those who have descended into themselves, who have sat within their pain, wrestled with their fears, made peace with solitude, speak differently. Their words do not try to impress. They do not speak to fill space. They speak when something needs to be said. And when they do, it lands. Because their voice does not come from the surface, it rises from the depths, from experience, from truth that has been earned in silence. In a world addicted to volume, depth is often overlooked. People chase attention with noise, louder, faster, more. Yet clarity does not come from shouting. It comes from stillness. The deepest insights are not screamed. They are felt. They echo through the soul, not because they demand, but because they resonate. And like the cave, the human heart becomes more honest the deeper it goes. Shallow waters ripple with every disturbance, but at the bottom, where the world is still, truth becomes clear. That is where the real voice waits, the one not shaped by ego or fear, but by time and reflection. So if the world ever falls silent around you, if life feels like a descent into some unseen cavern, do not panic. Listen. What echoes back may be the clearest sound you have ever heard. Not because it is new, but because you have finally reached the place quiet enough to hear it. It is better to sit with a fool in silence than to argue with the clever in haste. There is a kind of wisdom that does not seek to win. It seeks to understand, and sometimes that wisdom says nothing at all. To sit with a fool in silence may seem like a waste of time, yet it is peace disguised as patience. The fool may speak nonsense or nothing at all, but in silence no harm is done. The mind remains still, the heart unprovoked. But to argue with the clever in haste is to walk into a fire with dry skin. Cleverness without calm is dangerous. It does not seek truth, it seeks victory. It twists words, escalates tension, and feeds the ego. The conversation becomes a battlefield, and both walk away wounded, more entrenched, less clear, more certain of being right, yet further from what truly matters. Haste is the enemy of clarity. Even the most brilliant thoughts, when spoken too quickly, become blades. Ideas need space to breathe. Truth needs silence to rise. And when two clever minds collide in a hurry, it becomes a race, not a dialogue. Words are fired, not felt. Points are scored, but no one grows. The fool in silence may teach nothing, but they demand nothing. They leave you with your own thoughts, with your own breath. And sometimes, that is more valuable than the most articulate argument. For silence invites reflection. Haste invites regret. Not every debate deserves your energy. Not every provocation needs a response. To walk away, to breathe, to choose stillness over cleverness. That is not weakness. That is mastery. The wise know that the cost of a rushed argument is often the truth itself, and they would rather sit in stillness than drown in the noise of cleverness. Used without care, the spider does not ask if its web is perfect, it simply spins. There is something deeply humbling about the way a spider works. It does not wait for the perfect moment. It does not seek approval. It does not second-guess the design. It simply spins, thread by thread, silently, diligently, without ceremony. And sometimes the wind tears it down. Sometimes a branch breaks it. Sometimes it catches nothing. Yet the spider spins again. Not because it is certain of success, but because spinning is what it was born to do. Human beings, unlike spiders, are burdened with the weight of doubt. Before creating anything, there is hesitation. Is it good enough? Will others receive it? Is it worth doing if it isn't flawless? So many never begin, not because they cannot, but because they are waiting for certainty. Perfection becomes the prison, and within that cell, nothing is built, nothing is shared, nothing is lived. But the spider knows better. It does not measure the symmetry before starting. It does not ask whether the light falls upon it just so. It moves with instinct, with rhythm, with quiet commitment. And the result? A web that captures far more than prey. It captures the essence of what it means to do without overthinking, to create without apology. There is wisdom in forgetting the outcome and returning to the act itself. The spider does not chase validation. Its web is its presence. It is an offering, and that is enough. Because perfection does not live in a flawless design. It lives in the persistence, the patience, the silent courage to continue. Some webs will break, some will be ignored, yet each one teaches the fingers where to weave next. And that is the true artistry, not in waiting to be perfect, but in spinning again and again until something holds. Not because it is flawless, but because it exists. One who dances with their shadow never dances alone. There is a part of every person that hides in the quiet, a shape just behind the smile, a flicker behind the confidence, a silence beneath the noise. The shadow, not evil, not broken, only the pieces disowned, the anger swallowed, the fear buried, the grief denied. Most run from it. They flood their days with distraction. They build lives that shine on the outside, hoping the shadow will not catch up. But it always does. To dance with it is something entirely different. It is not submission. It is courage. It is the moment one stops pretending to be only light and welcomes the parts they were told to hide. It is sitting beside the wound and saying, "I see you." It is hearing the voice of doubt and whispering, "You belong here too." When you dance with your shadow, you are no longer alone, because for the first time, every part of you is invited to move together. People imagine that healing is about erasing the darkness, but the soul does not seek perfection. It seeks wholeness. And wholeness means taking your shadow by the hand, letting it show you where you have been fractured, letting it remind you that pain has shaped you, not ruined you, that fear once kept you alive, that shame once tried to protect you. When the shadow is no longer a threat, it becomes a partner, and so the dance begins. Awkward, honest, unscripted, yet real. In that movement, something shifts. You stop fighting yourself. You stop running. You become less afraid of being seen because now you have seen yourself. And the one who has done that never walks alone again. Not because they are surrounded, but whole. Every step becomes more grounded. Every breath more true, because they are no longer performing. They are dancing. The falcon soars highest when it lets go of the need to hunt. There is a freedom in flight that most will never taste. A falcon does not rise to conquer. It rises to feel the wind press beneath its wings. When it stops chasing, when it is no longer gripped by hunger or driven by survival, it does not lose power. It finds it. Because the highest flight is not about the hunt. It is about surrender. The falcon climbs not to catch, but to become one with the sky. And in that stillness, that letting go, it reaches heights it could never otherwise touch. Bound to need, human beings are taught to pursue, to chase goals, success, validation, more, always more. The hunt becomes identity, achievement becomes air. But in that chase, something sacred is lost. The sky becomes a battleground instead of a home. Life becomes a race instead of a rhythm. And no matter how high the flight, the heart remains tethered to what it must have, rather than what it already is. But when the falcon stops needing, it stops grasping. And when it stops grasping, it begins to float. It trusts the current. It lets the wind lift it. And ironically, that is when it soars the highest. Not when it is fixed upon the prey below, but when it forgets the ground entirely. That is the secret of true elevation, detachment. There is a kind of rise that comes not from force, but from surrender. Not from domination, but from alignment. The falcon does not prove its strength by what it catches, but by how effortlessly it rides the unseen air. And human beings, too, can touch those skies. Not by hungering for more, but by releasing what they thought they needed. That is when the soul soars, when the hunger fades and the sky finally opens. What is built slowly lasts longer than what is rushed into existence. In a world addicted to speed, slowness is mistaken for failure. People want results now, love now, success now, clarity now. But the things that truly matter cannot be microwaved into meaning. They require time, friction, patience. The roots that hold a tree through storms are not grown in a day. The deepest connections are not sparked, they are nurtured. And the kind of strength that does not collapse under pressure is forged slowly, never instantly. Rushing creates the illusion of progress, yet speed so often skips the foundations. A relationship that feels electric but never faces silence will one day crack. A career built on shortcuts rather than skill will tremble the moment it is challenged. Even self-worth, when manufactured through achievements, will collapse the moment the applause fades. Without depth, there is no durability, and depth requires time. The things that endure are the things crafted layer by layer, with care, with pauses, with setbacks that are not failures, but part of the shaping. A house that takes longer to build will stand longer. A life that evolves through stillness and reflection will not shatter in noise. And a person who allows themselves to unfold slowly will carry a strength that cannot be faked. But this kind of building is quiet, unseen. It does not give sudden bursts of pleasure. It does not impress at first glance. And that is why it is rare. Most abandon it for faster paths. Yet those who remain, those who choose the slow rise over the fast burn, create something unshakable. A peace that is not dependent on circumstance. A joy that is not borrowed. A self that is not hollow. What is built slowly becomes sacred, not because it is perfect, but because it was chosen, repeatedly, patiently. Such an existence does not merely survive, it endures long after the rushed and the loud have faded into dust. Wisdom is not what is added, but what is removed. People often confuse wisdom with accumulation. More books, more quotes, more strategies, more tools. There is a belief that the wise are those who know the most, speak the longest, fill rooms with knowledge. But real wisdom does not come from stacking information like bricks. It comes from chiseling away everything that is not essential, like a sculptor revealing the form hidden inside the stone. Wisdom is what remains when the noise is stripped away. The child asks 100 questions, the student fills their notebook, the expert explains in detail, but the wise one listens, pauses, and then speaks a single sentence that changes everything. Not because it is complex, but because it is clean. Because it has been refined in the fire of experience and emptied of all that is unnecessary. In life, people carry so much: assumptions, fears, opinions inherited but never earned, rules they never questioned, roles they never chose. And these layers weigh them down, fog their clarity, and clutter their minds. But wisdom does not ask for more. It asks what can be let go, which beliefs no longer serve, which voices are merely echoes of someone else, which truths are no longer true. The wise know that understanding deepens as the clutter fades. That silence often reveals more than explanation. That clarity comes not from finding the right answer, but from letting go of the wrong questions. Wisdom is the space left behind after the ego grows quiet, after the pride has been humbled, after the need to prove has gone. It is in the emptiness that truth rings loudest. In the stillness, the answer finally fits. And when the last unnecessary piece falls away, what remains is not more, but less. Less illusion, less resistance, less noise. And that is where wisdom begins. The lion does not roar to prove it is strong. It simply walks. True strength does not announce itself. It does not posture, demand, or shout. The lion, sovereign of the wild, does not need to prove what it is. It does not pace the plains searching for applause. It does not roar to validate its place. It simply moves, calmly, deliberately, and with presence. And in that quiet confidence, everything around it listens. Yet human beings have forgotten this. In a world of noise, strength has become performance. People raise their voices to be heard. They flaunt success to be admired. They defend themselves constantly, afraid that silence will be mistaken for weakness. But real power does not react to doubt. It does not need witnesses. It is known from within. The loudest in the room is often the most unsure. Roaring is easy. especially when fueled by fear, by ego, by insecurity. But walking steady, grounded, without any need for attention, that requires a deeper kind of power, one that is not swayed by praise or threatened by silence, one that does not collapse when unseen. The lion's strength lies in its restraint. It does not chase every threat. It does not waste energy proving itself. It knows what it is, and that knowing shapes its every move. That is what makes it powerful. Not the roar, but the stillness behind it. To live like this is to reclaim dignity, to stop reacting, to stop justifying your worth, to move through the world with a quiet force that needs no validation. When you walk like the lion, people feel it, not because you are loud, but real. And in a world of desperate noise, nothing is more commanding than one who no longer needs to roar. The door opens when the knocking ceases. There is a kind of desperation in repeated knocking, a fist pounding again and again, louder each time, demanding an answer, a response, an entry. It is the sound of the anxious mind, of the heart that cannot bear silence, that mistakes noise for progress. But there is a strange truth tucked quietly behind that door. It does not open to noise. It opens to stillness. It waits not for effort, but for surrender. So many beg for change, chase clarity, demand outcomes. They knock on love, on purpose, on healing, with clenched fists and frantic hearts. Yet the harder they pound, the tighter the door seems to stay shut. Because the door does not respond to force. It does not open for those who try to break it down. It opens for those who learn to wait, to listen, to stop hammering their wants against what still needs time to become ready. Knocking is action. Stopping is trust. It is the moment you step back and realize that no amount of effort will bend the timing to your will, that silence is not rejection, it is incubation, that sometimes the world is not saying no, it is asking you to be still long enough to receive what is already on its way. And in that stillness, something shifts, the heart softens, the breath slows, the demand fades. And often without warning, without fanfare, the door eases open. Not because you earned it through noise, but because you finally became quiet enough to walk through. The lesson was never in the knocking. It was in what happened when the need to knock disappeared. When the struggle to be let in became the peace of knowing you were already standing at the threshold. The leaf that falls returns to the root. At first glance, a falling leaf seems like the end of something. It drifts downward, away from the branch that once held it, away from the sunlight that once nourished it. It looks like loss. It looks like surrender. But the truth runs deeper. The fall is not an ending. It is a return. Because when the leaf touches the earth, it begins to break down, to soften, to dissolve. And in doing so, it feeds the very root from which it once grew. This is the quiet cycle of life that most people miss. That nothing is truly lost. That what falls away becomes nourishment. That even decay carries a purpose. The things people release, relationships, identities, dreams, do not vanish into nothing. They sink into the soil of experience. They enrich the ground of the soul. They prepare it for deeper growth. But it is hard to see that while falling. People cling to the branch, terrified of change, desperate to remain in bloom. They see loss as failure, letting go as weakness. Yet the leaf knows better. It knows that the release is sacred. It knows that the root will need what it becomes. It trusts the descent. To fall does not mean to break. It means to return to truth, to humility, to what truly matters. The root never forgets the leaf, and the leaf, even in its descent, carries the memory of where it came from. The bond is never broken. It only transforms. So when something in your life falls, let it. When a season ends, release it. The fall is not punishment. It is part of the cycle. And the deeper the fall, the richer the soil. The root is waiting, not to mourn you, but to be fed by you, because even in death, the leaf gives life. Stillness is not the absence of movement, but the presence of balance. Stillness is so often misunderstood. People imagine it as frozen, passive, inert, as doing nothing, as being still like a statue. But true stillness is not lifeless. It is alive in a way that few things are. It does not come from stopping movement. It comes from aligning everything within that movement. A tree sways in the wind, yet remains rooted. A dancer spins, yet their center never falters. That is stillness. Not the lack of motion, but the quiet harmony within it. The world never stops moving. Life never stops asking. Thoughts arrive, emotions rise, circumstances shift, and people chase stillness by trying to escape it all. Disconnect, retreat, go numb. But escape is not stillness. Real stillness is when all the chaos can swirl around you, and yet your center remains unshaken. It is when your breath moves, your heart beats, your thoughts flow, but none of it pulls you off balance. It is a kind of inner posture, one that does not resist life, but receives it without tipping over. Stillness is not silence. It is the ability to hear clearly through the noise. It is not stopping the river. It is becoming the calm part of the current. And those who master this do not appear motionless. They simply move differently, with grace, with presence, with a control that does not grip but flows. There is a sacred kind of power in a person who has found their still point. You feel it in the way they speak, the way they pause, the way they do not chase every distraction, do not react to every pull, because their stillness is not fragile, it is anchored. And the more the world moves, the deeper they drop into it. That is not absence, that is mastery. The presence of balance in a moving world. The one who forgives first is the strongest. Forgiveness is often mistaken for surrender, for letting someone off the hook, for pretending the pain was not real. But true forgiveness is not weakness. It is an act of immense strength. It asks one to do something that pride resists, that anger clings to, and that ego wants to delay, to release. Not because the other deserves it, but because you deserve peace. To forgive first is to reclaim your power before it turns into poison. It means choosing to no longer be ruled by the wound, because every moment spent holding a grudge is a moment you carry the weight of someone else's actions. Bitterness is heavy, resentment builds walls, and though it may feel like protection, it is a prison made from your own refusal to heal. The one who forgives first does not lose. They lead. They interrupt the cycle. They say, I will not continue this war inside me just to prove I was right. They recognize that forgiveness is not saying the pain did not happen. It is saying it no longer controls the narrative. That is power. That is strength. That is freedom. Waiting for an apology is easy. It is passive. It lets time harden the heart while pretending to stand firm. But stepping forward without permission from the past, that is rare. That is revolutionary. It means you have made peace more important than pride, healing more important than history. Forgiveness does not always come with closure. It does not guarantee reconciliation. It may not even be noticed by the one who hurt you, but it is noticed by your spirit. It feels the weight drop, the breath return, the heart open again. To forgive first is not to forget. It is to remember who you are beneath the wound, strong enough to feel, to release, and to rise without dragging the past behind you. That kind of strength is not loud, yet it is unshakable. The body ages, but the breath is always young. Time carves itself into the body. Lines form, joints ache, muscles tire. The mirror becomes a quiet reminder that nothing physical escapes change. And yet, amid the slow and certain march of years, there is one thing that does not wrinkle: the breath. The same breath that entered the lungs on the very first day still enters now, untouched by years, unchanged by calendars. It does not grow old. It simply is, ageless, eternal, always now. The breath is the thread that ties each moment to the next. While the body bends under time's weight, the breath remains light, free, undiminished. It does not lose its rhythm the way footsteps do. It does not forget the way memory does. It is as youthful in an old man as it is in a newborn, because the breath does not belong to the body. It belongs to the life moving through it. And yet, so many ignore it. They chase youth in creams, in surgeries, in the desperation to pause the inevitable. But real youth, true vitality, has never been in the skin. It lives in the awareness of the breath, in remembering that no matter how much time has passed, this moment, this inhale, is as fresh and full as the very first. The wise do not chase youth. They return to it through the breath. They know that every deep inhale is a reset, and every slow exhale is a surrender. That within the rhythm of breathing dwells the one thing time cannot touch: presence. Because the body is the house, but the breath is the light that moves through every room. And though the walls may crack and the doors may creak, the light remains the same, bright, quiet, forever young. The mountain does not speak, yet all who pass learn from it. There is a kind of wisdom that needs no words, a presence so complete, so unmoved, that it teaches without trying. The mountain does not explain itself. It does not chase attention. It does not defend its existence. It simply is, immense, still, and silent. And somehow, in that silence, it changes those who come near. People climb it for glory, for challenge, for clarity. They bring their noise, their ambitions, their fears, their stories, and by the time they reach its peak, something has shifted. Not because the mountain gave them answers, but because it did not. It offered space, it offered perspective, and in its stillness, people heard themselves more clearly. That is the paradox. The most powerful teachers often say the least. The mountain does not judge, it does not flatter, it simply reflects what is brought to it. The tired feel their weakness. The proud feel small. The restless feel stillness for the first time. It holds a mirror without distortion, and those who are willing to listen to silence leave with something louder than any speech could give. To be like the mountain is to know that your presence is enough, that you do not have to argue to be wise, that truth does not need to shout, that sometimes simply standing firmly, being rooted, being real is the most instructive thing you can do. People feel it. They sense what you carry. And often, your silence teaches more than your opinions ever could. Not everyone who passes the mountain understands it. Some rush by, focused only on the summit. But those who pause, who sit with its silence, who breathe alongside it, they leave changed. Not because the mountain spoke, but because it did not need to. In its stillness, they finally heard what mattered. Let go or be dragged. Some things do not break cleanly. A relationship, a memory, a dream that did not unfold the way it should have. They cling like barbed wire, sharp, painful, and deceptively familiar. And yet, even as they bleed the soul dry, people hold on out of fear, out of habit, out of the lie that maybe, just maybe, things will return to the way they were. But there comes a moment, quiet, undeniable, when the truth becomes impossible to ignore. If it is not released, it will pull you under. Let go, or be dragged. The dragging is subtle at first. A heaviness in the chest, a tension in the jaw, thoughts that circle like vultures around what cannot be changed. But over time, the weight grows. It shows up in sleepless nights, strained relationships, a constant feeling of being behind in a life that keeps moving forward without permission. Because pain does not pause simply because someone refuses to release it. It tightens its grip. It digs in deeper. Letting go is not forgetting. It is not pretending it did not matter. It is choosing not to let what hurt you own you. It is releasing the illusion that you must carry every wound, every failure, every ghost. And yes, it feels like loss, but it is not the loss of something that was ever meant to stay. It is the loss of a chain. Freedom does not come from holding on tighter. It comes from the courage to unclench, to stop dragging the weight of what is no longer yours, to stop being pulled across a life you are no longer living. Letting go is not weakness. It is the ultimate act of power. The moment you stop being the prisoner of the past and become the author of what comes next. Because you cannot fly while being dragged, and you were not made to crawl. The more one speaks of wisdom, the further it drifts. There is a paradox hidden inside wisdom. It resists being captured. The moment it is spoken too often, too loudly, too eagerly, it begins to dissolve. Like a mist disturbed by motion, it slips away just as the hand reaches for it. True wisdom does not need to be advertised. It does not scream through lectures or flood conversation with cleverness. It sits quietly in presence, in restraint, in knowing when to be silent. The more it is spoken of, the more it becomes about the speaker, and the further it drifts from truth. In a world obsessed with sharing insights, packaging advice, and branding enlightenment, wisdom has become a performance. But real wisdom has no ego. It does not rush to be quoted. It does not ask to be admired. It is lived, not displayed. And those who truly carry wisdom often say the least. Not because they lack words, but because they have seen how words so often fail. Wisdom is felt more than heard. It lives in the tone of a voice that does not rise, in eyes that listen before they judge, in decisions made without the need for applause. It passes through glances, through pauses, through quiet actions that ripple deeper than any speech. Yet when it is overexplained, overshared, dissected until nothing living remains, it becomes philosophy, not truth. Information, not transformation. The wise do not try to own wisdom. They let it visit briefly, like a bird landing on the shoulder before flying off again. They know that the moment they try to hold it too tightly or wrap it in words, it begins to vanish. For wisdom is not something you carry in your mouth. It is something that shapes your very being. And so it drifts away, not out of reach, but out of performance. It hides where words cannot follow, waiting for those who no longer need to speak of it to finally understand. There are no shortcuts to the summit of a sacred mountain. The sacred mountain calls to something deeper than ambition. It calls to the soul. It is not merely a peak to be conquered. It is a path meant to transform. But the modern mind wants speed. It wants the summit without the steps, the reward without the struggle, the wisdom without the walk. And yet on this kind of journey, there are no shortcuts. Every step must be earned. Every lesson must be lived. People try to bypass the climb. They chase teachers, tricks, 5-step formulas to enlightenment. They want the clarity, the peace, the strength, and they want it now. But the sacred mountain does not bend to impatience. It demands presence. It humbles the prideful. It tests the heart. And to those who try to skip the path, it offers nothing in return. For it is not about the summit. It is about who you become on the way up, the doubts you face, the truths you cannot unsee, the moments you fall to your knees, not because you have failed, but because something inside you has broken open. That is the sacredness, not the view from the top, but the quiet deaths and rebirths that happen in the silence between each step. The sacred mountain does not care how fast you move. It cares how deeply. Whether your feet kiss the earth with reverence, whether your breath is real, whether you can sit with yourself in the cold and hear something other than your own fear. Shortcuts steal all of that. They give the illusion of progress, but they rob you of the strength and clarity that only come from the climb. To walk slowly, honestly, step by step, that is the path. There is no helicopter to wisdom, no elevator to the soul, only the mountain, only the silence, and only the one willing to keep rising, even when no one is watching, even when the peak is hidden in clouds. To be without need is to possess everything. Need creates the illusion of emptiness. It whispers that something is missing, that happiness is just one achievement, one relationship, one possession away. It paints life as a ladder, always with another rung waiting above. And so people climb, they chase, they hunger. They grip tightly to what they believe will finally complete them. But the more they need, the more they feel they lack. And the more they chase, the more distant peace becomes. In truth, to be without need is not to have less. It is to lack nothing. It is to possess everything that truly matters. The mind tethered to desire can never rest. It burns with comparison, aches with expectation, breaks beneath disappointment. But when the flame of need dies down, what remains is astonishing. Clarity, contentment, enoughness. A person who is free from need walks through the world unburdened, not because they have everything, but realize that they are everything. The storm of craving is past, and in its silence everything is already present. Without need, joy returns to the simple places, the warmth of sunlight, the rhythm of breath, a conversation untainted by wanting, a moment untouched by striving. Suddenly, what was always overlooked becomes luminous, and the one who no longer chases finally sees what was there all along. This is not about renunciation. It is about recognition. It is about seeing how much energy is spent believing something is missing. It is about discovering that the hunger was never for things, but for peace. And peace does not come when every desire is fulfilled. It comes when the need to desire itself vanishes. To be without need is to live from fullness, not from lack. It is to move through life like a cup already overflowing. And from that place, even the smallest moment becomes everything, because it already is everything, and nothing more is required. The wolf howls not to be heard, but because it must. The howl of a wolf pierces the night not for applause, not for recognition, not to prove its power, but because something inside it demands to be released. It is not performance, it is instinct. A raw, unfiltered truth that rises from the chest and splits the silence. The wolf does not ask whether anyone is listening. It howls because to stay silent would be unbearable. There is a lesson in that for the human soul. In a world obsessed with being seen, validated, and affirmed, expression has become decoration. People speak, not always from truth, but from expectation. They tailor their voices to fit the trends, to win approval, to avoid rejection. But the deepest parts of the self cannot be filtered. They ache, they burn, and like the wolf, they must be released. Not to be admired, but to stay alive. Real expression, the kind that comes from the core, is messy. It is not always beautiful or clever or marketable. It may tremble, it may weep, it may roar, but it is real, and that is what makes it sacred. The wolf does not care whether the night understands its cry. It only knows that silence would be more painful than the vulnerability. When a person speaks, creates, loves, or grieves from that place, from the unedited heart, they are not asking the world to echo back approval. They are simply honoring what must move through them. That is strength. That is freedom. To stop waiting for permission to feel. To stop shaping truth into something safe and palatable. The howl is not a request. It is a release. And those who dare to speak from that same wild honesty, whether heard or not, live a life that is not hollow. They become whole, not by being understood, but by being true. The sky never resists the cloud. It simply waits. The sky does not flinch when storms gather. It does not fight the fog or chase away the darkness. It does not beg the cloud to leave, nor does it demand the sun to stay. It holds it all, calm, vast, undisturbed. Because the sky understands what so many forget. Clouds pass. They always do. Some linger longer than others. Some arrive heavy with rain. Some thunder and break open, but none of them stay. And the sky, in its endless patience, simply waits. Human beings, on the other hand, wrestle with the clouds. The mind storms against sadness, against fear, against uncertainty, treating each difficult emotion as something to be solved, erased, pushed away. But the more it is resisted, the more it spreads. The more it is feared, the heavier it becomes. The soul grows cramped by the refusal to feel. Yet if it learned from the sky, it would know that presence is not resistance, and peace is not found in control. It is found in spaciousness. Waiting does not mean weakness. It means wisdom. It is the understanding that emotions are weather, not identity, that what covers the light cannot extinguish it. The sky is never diminished by what passes through it, and neither are you. To be like the sky is to allow, to let the storm enter without losing yourself to it, to feel the cloud without collapsing beneath it, and to know, without rushing, that light always returns. Not because it was fought for, but because it was never truly gone. The sky does not need to clear the way. It just keeps being sky, open, still, infinite. And in time, every cloud moves on. Not because it was resisted, but because it was allowed. You cannot read the stars while staring at your own footprints. There is a certain kind of blindness that comes from looking only at where you have been. When the eyes are fixed downward on every misstep, every regret, every scar, they miss the vastness above. The stars do not live in the past. They do not exist in the rut of overthinking or the grooves of old wounds. They hang in silence, in perspective, in the kind of clarity that reveals itself only when you look up. But people become obsessed with their footprints. They trace them over and over, trying to make sense of the journey. They analyze every wrong turn, every mistake, as if understanding the past will guarantee the future. And while reflection can teach, it can also trap. Because staring too long at the path behind you can blind you to where you are meant to go. The stars offer something the footprints never can: direction, possibility, wonder. They remind you that you are part of something larger than your mistakes, that your life is not confined to the choices you have already made, that there is more beyond the loop of memory and guilt. But to see them, you have to lift your gaze. You have to stop worshiping your own history and open yourself to something vaster. Friends, a small request. Support The Dark Mind with a like. It truly helps the channel grow. Footprints tell you where you have been. The stars show you where you could go. One is closed and done. The other is infinite. And the tragedy is that many never look up. They walk with their heads down, convinced they are lost, while the entire sky is whispering a quiet invitation. There is more. To read the stars is to stop defining yourself by your past. It is to be led by vision, not memory. And sometimes, all it takes is the courage to stop looking down. Even the moon rests in darkness half its time. The moon is admired for its glow, its calm light, its quiet beauty in the night sky. It pulls the tides, stirs dreams, and offers comfort to those wandering through shadow. But what most forget is that even the moon, radiant as it is, spends half its life unseen, half its cycle cloaked in darkness. And yet it does not rush to shine again. It does not panic when hidden. It rests. It disappears without fear because it knows that darkness is not disappearance. It is part of becoming whole. In a world obsessed with constant visibility, with shining always, there is little room left for retreat. People measure their worth by how brightly they burn, how consistently they perform, how often they are seen. But nature tells another story, one of cycles, not constancy. The moon reminds us that brilliance does not mean never fading, that rest is not failure, that withdrawal is not weakness. Even when unseen, the moon is still the moon. It does not stop being itself when hidden. It simply allows the night to hold it, without needing to prove its light. And so must we. There are times to shine, to show up, to radiate. But there are also times to dim, to pull back, to sit in the quiet of ourselves without explanation. The darkness is not a punishment. It is a passage, a place where light gathers strength again, a time for silence, for reflection, for restoration. And the one who learns to rest like the moon does not fear being unseen. They know their worth is not in constant light, but in the rhythm of return. Because just like the moon, we are not meant to glow endlessly. We are meant to breathe in phases, to trust the darkness, to know that even when the world cannot see us, we are still full, still whole, still becoming. A bird does not need a reason to sing. The bird does not sing for applause. It does not ask if its voice matters. It does not check the hour or wait for permission. It simply sings because it is alive, because the sun has risen, because there is breath in its lungs. The melody pours from its chest, not to be heard, but because it cannot be contained. That is the freedom most have forgotten how to live with. Humans, unlike the bird, often feel they must justify their joy, that happiness must be earned, that expression must have a purpose. They silence themselves, waiting for a perfect moment, for approval, for the fear to pass. But life does not wait. And the deepest songs, the ones that heal, that connect, that awaken, come not from a plan, but from presence. There is something sacred about doing what the soul longs to do without asking why. Laughing for no reason, creating without a goal, loving without calculation. These are the notes that make a life sing. Yet too often they are buried under shoulds and shame and striving. People forget that being alive is reason enough. The bird sings even when no one is listening. It does not measure its voice against others. It does not wonder whether it deserves to be heard. It simply lets the song rise, trusting that its very existence is worth celebrating. That is not foolishness. That is wisdom. The kind that knows the sound of the heart matters more than the world. To live in this way is to return to something primal, to know that you do not need a reason to feel joy, to dance in the kitchen, to write a single line of poetry, to speak something kind. You need only to let what is within you rise. For like the bird, your song was never meant to be justified. It was meant to be lived. Water teaches more than fire. It enters silently and reshapes the world. Fire is given the glory. It roars, it dazzles, it consumes. It demands to be witnessed, and for a moment, It feels unstoppable. But fire burns itself out. It leaves ash, destruction, silence after noise. Water, by contrast, does not need to scream. It does not explode. It seeps. It waits. It moves through cracks, settles into corners, touches everything without needing to dominate. And slowly, without permission or applause, it changes the shape of the world. A river does not argue with the mountain. It does not try to break the mountain apart in a single day. It touches it gently, again and again, year after year, until the rock bends, until the unmovable is moved. That is how water teaches, through persistence, not power, through softness, not force. Its lesson is not how to conquer, but how to endure and transform without violence. People chase fire. They chase intensity, quick results, visible triumph. But most of life is water, not flame. It is slow healing, quiet strength, invisible shifts. A broken heart does not mend with a spark. It mends with time, like a stream smoothing stone. Real growth happens in the moments no one sees, when patience replaces urgency, when gentleness takes root where anger used to live. Water enters where nothing else can. It adapts, it reflects, it nourishes, and yet it carves canyons and drowns empires. Its silence is not weakness, it is wisdom, the kind that does not need to prove itself in order to change everything it touches. To live like water is to learn that you do not have to be loud in order to be powerful. You do not have to fight in order to be strong. You do not have to burn in order to leave a mark. You have only to keep flowing, to keep showing up, to keep touching the world until it changes, without ever losing your calm. The wise sleep with one eye turned inward. To the outer world, the wise may appear calm, quiet, even asleep. Yet beneath that stillness, something remains deeply awake, not watchful of danger, but of the self. One eye turned inward, gently observing the mind's movements, the heart's impulses, the subtle shifts of emotion that pass unnoticed by most. They rest, but they do not drift. They dream, but they are not lost. Their peace is not unconscious. It is alert. Most people sleep not only at night, but through life itself. They react, obey, consume, repeat. Days blur together. Thoughts come and go without ever being questioned. Desires arise and are chased without any understanding of where they come from. This is the sleep of the unexamined life, a comfort that numbs instead of heals. But the wise do something different. Even when the body softens, even when the eyes close, part of them remains aware, not paranoid, but present. It is a subtle thing, a whisper within that keeps asking, "What is this, really?" Not out of fear, but out of curiosity. The wise do not simply live, they witness. They do not simply think, they notice the shape and texture of thought itself. And in that witnessing, they stay grounded. Even within the dream, the eye turned inward does not judge. It does not interfere. It simply sees. It is the part of you that watches yourself react and asks whether that reaction is old or true. It is the quiet clarity that feels the rise of anger and chooses not to feed it. It is the presence that hears the voice of doubt and does not mistake it for truth. The wise know that waking life is also a kind of sleep, and sleep, too, can be part of awakening. So they rest, but not blindly. They live, but not unconsciously, because part of them never forgets. The deepest danger is not outside. It is falling asleep within. Let the dust settle. Only then will the path be clear. Clarity never arrives in the midst of chaos. When the dust is stirred, when thoughts race, when emotions flare like sandstorms within the heart, everything becomes clouded. Decisions feel urgent, reactions feel necessary. Yet what is seen in the middle of the storm is rarely the truth. It is distortion, magnified by confusion. The mind tries to act while the dust is still in the air, chasing certainty in a moment made for stillness. But the truth is simple and ancient. Let the dust settle. Only then will the path be clear. Life has a way of kicking up storms. A single word can unearth years of buried fear. A single loss can shatter structure. A single moment of uncertainty can fill the entire horizon. And in that haze, people grasp at answers, at fixes, at anything that feels like control. But nothing grounded ever comes from that place. The choices made in panic rarely serve the long road. Stillness is not stagnation. It is wisdom. It is knowing that what feels urgent is not always important. That clarity is not pulled from within the storm. It is revealed only after the storm has passed. The dust must fall. The air must clear. The noise must quiet. Only then can you see where you are truly standing and where you must step next. To let the dust settle is an act of trust. It is patience in the face of pressure. It is the refusal to move merely for the sake of feeling movement. And in that pause, in that deep breath after the whirlwind, the path that once seemed impossible reveals itself with a quiet certainty. The storm always passes, the dust always falls, yet rushing through the fog only leads deeper into confusion. Wait, breathe, stand still, for the ground beneath you has not changed, only your view of it has. And when the dust clears at last, it is all there. Every step, every stone, precisely where it was meant to be. The greatest teacher is the one who vanishes after the lesson. Not every teacher stays, not every guide walks beside you forever. Some enter your life like a passing shadow, brief, quiet, uncelebrated, and leave behind something far greater than their presence: transformation. They do not demand loyalty, do not ask to be followed, do not linger to be admired. They offer the lesson, then disappear, trusting that what you needed has already been planted. This is what makes them great. They do not become a crutch. They do not tether you to their voice. They do not seek to be remembered. They seek for you to remember yourself. Their gift lies not in how long they remain, but in how deeply their presence reshaped the way you walk once they are gone. They are like the wind to a flame, not the fire itself, but the force that helped it catch. Most crave teachers who stay, who reassure, who confirm, yet the finest ones teach you how to stop asking, how to stand without leaning, how to trust your own feet. They make themselves unnecessary. They vanish not from neglect, but from knowing. The final part of the lesson is learning to walk alone. Sometimes the teacher is a person, sometimes a heartbreak, sometimes a failure that cracked you open. You believe you need it to last forever, but permanence is not the measure of impact. Presence is. And those who vanish after the lesson teach the most important truth of all, that the lesson was never about them. It was about what they awakened in you. The greatest teacher leaves no shrine behind. They leave a question, a shift, a silence that echoes with a new kind of knowing. And when you look around and realize they are gone, that is when you understand you no longer need them, because the true teacher now lives within. When you stop needing the answer, it appears. The harder the mind chases truth, the faster it runs. The more desperately one seeks the answer, the more tangled the thoughts become. It is like trying to smooth water with your hand. The more you stir, the less you see. And yet, when the grasping finally ceases, when the pressure to know dissolves into quiet acceptance, something shifts. The answer, once hidden in the noise, begins to rise, unforced, uninvited, and suddenly obvious. Because truth does not respond to demand. It responds to openness. Need creates friction. It tightens the body, narrows perception, turns every thought into a test. When the mind needs an answer, it does not listen. It interrogates. It does not receive. It hunts. And in that urgency, all that is subtle and intuitive becomes muffled. The answer may already be there, whispering, but it is drowned out by the clamor of expectation. Insight cannot bloom in a storm of desperation. Yet when you surrender the hunt, when you stop needing the outcome to validate your worth, your direction, your identity, space opens. The fog begins to lift, like a knot that loosens when left alone. Clarity emerges not from force, but from release. It rises through the cracks of stillness, not the weight of effort. This is the paradox. The answer was never missing. It was only hidden behind the need. And when that need softens, when curiosity replaces desperation, when wonder replaces control, the answer steps forward, not always as a word, sometimes as a knowing, a feeling, a quiet certainty that does not shout, but settles. Letting go is not giving up. It is trusting that the deepest truths do not come on command. They arrive when you are still enough to hear them. And in that silence, where needing ends, understanding begins. There is no difference between a full cup and a broken one if the thirst is gone. Desire makes distinctions. It assigns value. It says, this is good, and that is ruined. A full cup is celebrated. A broken one is discarded. But take away the thirst, and both become equal. The story shifts. The obsession fades. And suddenly, what once seemed essential becomes irrelevant. Thirst, whether for love, approval, wealth, or meaning, gives objects their power. It is not the cup that matters. It is the ache behind it. That longing twists the world into hierarchies. Wholeness over brokenness. More over less. Gain over loss. But when the thirst dissolves, everything softens. The cup is only a shape. The crack is only a line. Neither carries importance unless the heart still craves. This is what the ancient sages meant when they spoke of liberation. Not liberation from life, but from longing. When the thirst disappears, so too does the suffering. The world remains, but it no longer defines you. You can hold the broken cup without shame. You can leave the full one untouched, because your peace no longer lives at the bottom of either. Most people spend their lives in pursuit of the full cup, terrified of the broken one. They chase, they compare, they grieve what cracks. But they forget. The real freedom is not in keeping the cup full. It is in no longer needing it to be. The thirst, not the cup, is what binds. To lose the thirst is not to lose wonder. It is to rediscover the beauty that was never tied to need. The silence between sips, the joy of simply being. And in that stillness, the broken cup and the full one sit side by side. Not as opposites, but as equal reflections of a life no longer defined by hunger. Those who own nothing sleep most peacefully. Possession whispers comfort, yet it also breeds weight. The more one owns, the more one must guard. A house filled with things becomes a fortress of fear. A wallet thick with wealth becomes a target. The mind does not rest when the hands are always full. It calculates, protects, maintains. And the heart, tethered to what might be lost, rarely softens enough to sleep deeply. But the one who owns nothing, who clings to nothing, lays their head down with nothing to lose. In that emptiness, peace finally breathes. Ownership is not only about material things. People own identities, reputations, grudges, expectations. They carry invisible vaults, titles, roles, stories they have told themselves so long they believe they must hold on. Yet all of it demands attention. Every possession, physical or not, needs energy to preserve. It keeps the mind alert even in the dark, running imaginary scenarios. What if it is taken, broken, changed, lost? But the one who releases ownership, who moves through the world not as a collector but as a guest, feels something rare. Freedom. They are not guarded. They are not haunted by what if. They rest not because the world is perfect, but because they no longer ask it to be. They need nothing from it. And in needing nothing, they become rich in ways money cannot measure. To own nothing does not mean to have nothing. It means to grasp nothing. To hold everything with open hands, knowing it can stay or go. Either way, you remain whole. That is where true rest lives. Not in the locked room, but in the open field. Not in the grip, but in the release. And so they sleep. Not because they have all they want, but because they want nothing more. Rest is not earned, it is remembered. The world tells you that rest must be deserved, that only after enough work, enough struggle, enough proving, can you finally lie down and breathe. Rest has been twisted into a reward, dangled just beyond reach like a prize for endurance. But ancient wisdom whispers something softer, something older. Rest was never something to win. It was something you forgot you always had. Before the schedules, before the deadlines, before the pressure to be constantly useful, rest was part of your nature. The body knew how to soften, the breath knew how to slow, the mind knew how to be still. Children do not ask if they have done enough before they fall asleep in the grass. Animals do not hesitate to stretch out in the sun. Rest is not granted. It is instinctual. Over time, however, it gets buried under guilt. You were taught that to stop is to fall behind, that slowing down is laziness, that doing nothing must be justified. And so you push, you chase, you grind, carving your worth into exhaustion. Yet the soul does not care about productivity. It craves return, not to achievement, but to wholeness. And to return, you do not need permission. You need remembrance. Rest is not a pause between important things. It is the important thing. It is where healing begins, where clarity seeps in through the cracks, where the nervous system unwinds and the heart relearns its rhythm. Rest does not make you weaker. It reminds you that you were never meant to burn just to be seen. To remember rest is to remember who you are beneath the doing. It is not the world that must allow it. It is you. And when you finally lay down the weight, not because you have earned the break, but because you remember you are already whole, something ancient exhales inside you. And that, at last, is peace. Suffering is often the first garment of awakening. Awakening does not begin with light. It begins with weight. With a heaviness so personal, so uninvited, it strips away every illusion of safety. Suffering arrives like a rough cloak thrown over the shoulders. Not asked for, not deserved, but undeniable. It itches. It burns. It chafes against everything once thought permanent. And yet that discomfort, that unbearable ache, is what breaks the surface of sleep. Suffering does not block awakening. It introduces it. At first, pain feels like punishment. It closes the throat, tightens the chest, whispers lies in the dark. This is the end. But something else stirs beneath that voice. A question, a crack, a silence deeper than grief. It is not the suffering that awakens, but what it destroys. The false certainty, the ego's armor, the belief that things must always go as planned. When all of that collapses, something raw and real is exposed. In that nakedness, truth can finally touch the skin. No one seeks awakening through suffering, but those who awaken often look back and realize the pain was the doorway, the heartbreak was the teacher. The failure was the beginning of clarity. Suffering shakes the ground not to punish, but to invite. It loosens what never belonged. It interrupts the dream. It says, wake up, look again. Nothing is what you thought, and everything you need is already inside you. Like a garment, suffering eventually becomes something to shed, not because it did not matter, but because it served its purpose. It opened the eyes. It humbled the heart. It softened the mind enough to see the world not as it was feared to be, but as it truly is. Awakening does not come dressed in gold. It comes in ash. And those who rise from it carry a different kind of light, one lit not in triumph, but in transformation. Let your breath be your prayer. You do not need words to speak to something greater. You do not need rituals or altars or perfect beliefs. Sometimes all you need is a single breath felt fully, deeply, without distraction. That breath, unnoticed by most, is the oldest language. It is what carried you into this world before you knew how to ask for anything. It is what stays with you when everything else falls away. Inhale, that is receiving. Exhale, that is releasing. Each breath is a cycle of surrender, of trust. The lungs do not demand proof that air will be there. They simply open. That is faith without effort. That is prayer without words. When life grows too vast for language, the breath keeps speaking on your behalf. You are alive. You are still here. You are still connected. Human beings search endlessly for meaning, for something sacred to hold on to, yet it has already been moving through them in every moment. The breath does not judge. It does not discriminate. It arrives in joy and in grief, in triumph and in loss. It stays steady when the mind is spinning, when the heart is breaking, when the world grows too loud. And when at last you turn your attention toward it, when you truly feel, it becomes a doorway. To let your breath be your prayer is to turn inward and discover what you once believed was missing. It is to say, this moment is enough. It is to cease running, cease performing, and return to the rhythm that has always been guiding you. You need not be certain. You need not be strong. You need only breathe with reverence, with presence, with the quiet knowing that this too is holy. The breath asks nothing of you. It offers everything, and all that is required is that you receive it, like a prayer already answered. A fire cannot burn itself. Let the mind observe the mind. A fire dances, devours, spreads, yet it cannot turn inward and consume itself. It cannot look upon its own flame. It cannot touch its own source. The mind is the same. It thinks, it analyzes, it reacts. It races through the world like fire through a dry field. Left unchecked, it never pauses, never sees itself, never questions the source of its own motion. And in that blindness, suffering grows. For thought watching thought is like a flame trying to hold itself within its own hands. It burns endlessly and sees nothing. Yet something remarkable happens the moment the mind ceases trying to be everything and begins instead to watch itself. The thinking does not stop, the noise does not vanish, but a distance appears. A quiet witness stirs behind the storm. And in that space, awareness steps forward, not as another thought, but as presence itself. Not fire, but the clear, still air surrounding it. This is not analysis. This is not mental gymnastics. It is a gentle noticing, a turning inward, not to judge, but to observe, to watch thoughts rise and fall without being pulled into their gravity, to witness the craving, the fear, the story, and to know, this is the mind, but I am the one watching. The mind cannot watch itself while entangled within itself. It can only be seen when awareness steps outside of it. True peace begins there, not by silencing the fire, but by no longer mistaking it for you. When the mind observes the mind, its power to control weakens. It still flickers, still speaks, but it no longer drags you through its flames. You become the sky, not the storm, the witness, not the thought, the awareness, not the fire. And in that awareness, the fire settles, not extinguished, simply seen. And what is truly seen loses its power to burn. Anger is a wind that blows out the lamp of the heart. Anger does not always arrive in flames. Sometimes it comes as a cold wind, sudden, sharp, invisible. And when it rises unchecked, it does not merely rage outward. It turns inward, extinguishing the quiet light that once kept you warm. That light, your compassion, your clarity, your ability to see without distortion, begins to flicker. And if the wind keeps blowing, it dies. There is a moment, just before anger fully takes hold, when you can feel it tightening in your chest, the heat behind your eyes, the tension in your jaw. Then it begins to speak for you, to think for you. It dresses itself in righteousness, in justice, in defense, but underneath it is only chaos. It demands reaction, not resolution. It makes enemies of loved ones and strangers of yourself. And all the while, the lamp dims. The heart, when lit, sees things as they are. It gives space, it listens, it forgives. But anger clouds that vision. It shrinks your world to a single moment, a single offense, a single story you cannot release. It convinces you that you are strong, while quietly severing you from the very parts of yourself that make strength meaningful. Wisdom, tenderness, grace. This is not to say anger has no place. It can be a signal, a warning, a fire that burns through illusion. But left unchecked, it becomes destructive. It does not clarify, it consumes. And what remains is not truth, but smoke. To protect the lamp of the heart, you must notice the wind before it rises. You must pause, breathe, step back from the edge. Not because you are suppressing, but choosing to guard the light. That light is rare, and once it goes out, it takes time to relight. Yet while it is burning, it reveals a different path, one where power is calm and love is not lost within the storm. The soil never brags about the tree it grows. The soil stays silent while roots dig into its chest and draw life from its depths. It says nothing while the tree rises, stretches toward the sky, blossoms in glory. The soil does not claim credit. It does not shout, "I made this." It does not beg for recognition. It simply holds, nourishes, gives quietly, invisibly. For true support does not need applause. It does not decorate itself with proof. The soil knows what it gave, and that is enough. In a world addicted to validation, this kind of humility is rare. Human beings are quick to claim credit, to remind others of what they have done, to attach themselves to success. But real strength, the kind that nurtures others without demanding the spotlight, looks more like soil. It works in the dark. It holds steady when the winds arrive. And even as the world praises the bloom, it remains grounded. The soil does not compete with the tree. It does not envy the leaves, the height, the fruit. It understands that its power lies not in being seen, but in being foundational. And those who live this way, who support without needing to be known, leave the deepest impact. They are the reason others grow, even if their names are never spoken. To be like the soil is to embrace a quiet kind of greatness, the kind that does not need credit to feel proud, the kind that finds fulfillment in the rising of others. For when you have truly given, when your care has taken root in another's becoming, you have no need to speak of it. The tree is your echo, and that is enough. A single grain of rice can tip the scale. Be mindful of small actions. It does not take a boulder to break the balance. Sometimes it is only a grain of rice, quiet, unnoticed, seemingly insignificant, that shifts everything. Life rarely erupts in grand moments. It tilts in subtleties. A whispered word, a glance, a breath held a moment too long. The smallest action can begin an avalanche, not because it is loud, but because it lands where the weight was already close to breaking. People overlook the small. They fix their gaze on milestones, titles, declarations. They chase the grand gestures, believing that only what is massive makes a difference. But the ancient truth is quieter. The small is the mighty, the kind word that softens a heart, the moment of patience that prevents a fight, the tiny compromise that saves a bond between two souls. These are the grains of rice that no one applauds, yet they decide the story. Every day is filled with such grains. The decision to answer gently, the choice to listen rather than interrupt, the half-second between impulse and reaction. These moments pass invisibly, yet they shape your character more than any speech ever could. One careless comment can unravel years of trust. One thoughtful gesture can restore what seemed broken. The scale is always waiting, and it does not care about size. It cares about timing. Mindfulness begins here, in noticing what seems too small to matter, for that is where everything begins. The greatest transformations do not roar. They start with a shift. And often that shift is one grain added or removed. So walk gently, speak carefully, act with awareness, not out of fear, but out of respect for how close the world always is to changing. And remember, when things feel heavy beyond repair, sometimes the answer is not to lift the weight. It is to remove a single grain. Clarity arises not from seeking, but from ceasing to seek. The more one searches for clarity, the more it slips through the fingers like mist. The eyes dart, the mind spins, the heart pleads for answers, for direction, for certainty. And yet the harder the chase, the cloudier everything becomes. This is the great paradox of understanding. It does not come from effort, it comes from stillness. It is not found by reaching farther, it is found by stopping. In the moment that seeking ceases, clarity appears. Not because it was found, but because the noise that hid it finally went quiet. The act of seeking carries tension. It presumes lack. It is born from the belief that something is missing, that peace lives somewhere else, that truth is always just beyond the next thought. And so thought chases thought, questions pile upon questions. Like mud stirred in water, the mind clouds its own vision while trying to see more clearly. But when the seeking stops, not in defeat, but in surrender, something soft emerges. A kind of spaciousness, a deep breath, a silence not empty, but full. Clarity was never gone. It was simply drowned beneath the need to grasp, to fix, to know. When the grasping ends, the dust begins to settle. And in that stillness, truth no longer needs to be hunted. It simply reveals itself. Clarity is not a prize earned through struggle. It is a natural state that returns when the struggle ends. Like a reflection in still water, it was always there, only waiting for the ripples to fade. The wisest answers do not arrive in the noise of searching. They appear in the space between thoughts, in the quiet acceptance that there is nowhere else to go, nothing else to become. Stop. Breathe. Let go of the chase, and see what was never actually hidden, only obscured by the chase itself. Carry water, chop wood, repeat. The mind craves meaning, some great purpose, some revelation that will explain everything. It looks for the extraordinary, for the transformation that feels like thunder. But the deepest truths are found not in the spectacular, but in the repetition of the ordinary. Carry water, chop wood, repeat. It sounds simple. It sounds dull. Yet it holds the secret to a life that is grounded, awake, and quietly profound. This phrase is not about the task. It is about presence. To carry water with awareness is not a chore, it is meditation. To chop wood without rushing, without resentment, is to practice discipline and reverence at once. These acts become sacred not because of what they accomplish, but because of how they are done. They anchor you to the moment. They strip away ego. They humble. In modern life, people try to escape the mundane. They want shortcuts, upgrades, peak experiences. But the ancient lesson says, the path to wisdom is not above the routine, it is through it. You do the work, not to be seen, not for applause, but because the doing itself shapes you. Every repetition is a return to simplicity. Every return is a chance to go deeper. Carry water, chop wood, repeat. It is a call to show up fully, even in the smallest of tasks. It is the answer to restlessness, the antidote to distraction. When your mind wants to escape, this mantra pulls you back to the body, to the breath, to the now. For in the end, the extraordinary life is not built from extraordinary moments. It is built from ordinary moments done with extraordinary attention, again and again, without asking for more. And in that repetition, the sacred is revealed, not as something you find, but become. Even silence has a tone. Silence is not the absence of sound. It is a presence all its own. It enters a room like a breath held just a moment too long, subtle yet undeniable. It hums beneath the noise, waits behind every pause, lingers after words fade. Most believe silence to be empty, but those who listen closely know better. Silence has a tone. It is not heard through the ears, it is felt in the body, in the space between moments, in the truth that words cannot reach. The tone of silence shifts. In grief, it is heavy, thick like fog pressing against the chest. In awe, it is wide and light, stretching beyond thought. In tension, it crackles. In love, it wraps around you like a warm blanket, needing no explanation. Silence is never truly neutral. It speaks, and often it says more than voices ever could. Yet to hear it, one must stop filling the space. Most people drown silence before it can reveal itself. They rush to fill the gap with chatter, with answers, with movement, afraid of what might rise from the quiet. But silence is not something to fear. It is a mirror. It reflects back what is real, unedited, raw. That is why it is sacred. That is why it unnerves. The wise do not merely tolerate silence, they lean into it. They hear its tone like a tuning fork for the soul. They let it guide them, soften them, restore them. For silence is not passive. It listens back, and when met with presence, it responds. Even in the stillest moment, silence carries meaning. It can comfort, confront, reveal, or heal. It may not speak in words, yet it sings, and once you learn to hear it, you realize silence was never empty. It was always the most honest voice in the room. You are not the storm, you are the space through which it passes. When the storm comes, it is easy to believe that it defines you, that the fear, the chaos, the rage inside your chest is you. Thoughts spin like wind, emotions crash like thunder. Identity disappears in the noise. And suddenly, you feel as if you are the storm itself, uncontrollable, dangerous, lost. But you are not the storm. You are the sky that holds it. The storm is temporary. The space is not. The storm is anger, grief, panic, shame. It is loud. It is overwhelming. Yet even at its peak, it is only moving through. The mistake lies in thinking that because it feels so close, so real, so loud, it must be who you are. Step back. Breathe. Beneath it all, there is stillness. There is space. There is awareness. That awareness is you. The sky never fights the storm. It allows. It holds. It watches. And then, when the storm has exhausted itself, the sky remains unbroken, untouched. The storm never damaged it. It only passed through. This is what inner peace truly is. Not the absence of storms, but the deep knowing that they are not you, that you can feel them fully, even be shaken by them, without becoming them. That the thoughts shouting in your head are weather, not truth. That your sadness, no matter how heavy, is a visitor, not your identity. You do not need to fix the storm. You do not need to run from it. You need only to remember who you are beneath it. You are the vastness, the space, the watcher. And when you anchor yourself in that, the storm loses its grip. Not because it disappears, but because it no longer owns you. It simply moves, and you remain. Let your thoughts pass like birds. Do not invite them to build nests. Thoughts come and go like flocks in a shifting sky. They glide in, some gentle, some jagged, flashing images, fears, memories, needs. The mind, by nature, observes. But somewhere along the way, it starts clinging. A single thought flies through and is mistaken for truth. A worry flutters past and is mistaken for prophecy. Instead of watching them pass, the mind opens its windows, builds perches, and begins to feed them. Soon they nest, they multiply, and the once open sky becomes a crowded cage. Not every thought deserves your attention. Not every feeling is a fact. Not every inner voice is a reflection of your soul. Yet when you invite these thoughts to stay, when you replay them, feed them, decorate them with meaning, they settle in and take root. They whisper doubts at dawn. They steal peace in the silence. They convince you that you are them. But you are not your thoughts. You are the sky they pass through. And just as the sky does not cling to a single bird, neither must you hold on to every mental visitor. Watch them arrive. Nod as they pass. But do not build them homes. Do not feed them stories. Let them keep flying. This is not avoidance. It is awareness. It is the knowing that thoughts are movements, not anchors. That peace is not found by controlling the sky, but by allowing the flight without fear. By remembering that the thought will pass if only you stop begging it to stay. Let your mind be vast, open, uninhabited, a place where nothing lingers too long, where no thought is treated like a guest of honor. Watch the birds fly, watch them leave, and find your peace not in their absence, but in your refusal to let them nest. Enlightenment is not a peak, it is a clearing. Most imagine enlightenment as a summit high above the noise, beyond the struggle, far removed from the mess of ordinary life. A rarefied place reserved for the few, earned through effort, discipline, and years of spiritual labor. But the truth is quieter, stranger. Enlightenment is not a peak to be climbed. It is a clearing in the forest of thought, a sudden opening where the mind drops its weapons and the war inside goes still. It is not about rising above life, but falling into it completely. Not escape, but arrival. The mind expects fireworks, revelation, transcendence. Yet the real moment of awakening often comes with less sound, with a breath, a letting go, a glimpse of reality without the veil of judgment. Not a mountaintop, but a soft place where nothing needs to be added, fixed, or achieved. The struggle for the peak is itself the barrier. The one who chases enlightenment like a trophy carries too much weight to enter the clearing. But the one who stops, truly stops, who surrenders the climb, who no longer needs to reach or prove or become, they begin to notice something. The trees thin, the air lightens, the sky opens. In the clearing, there is no enlightenment to possess, only the absence of illusion. The ego, the stories, the striving, they fall away like old leaves. And what remains is not divine fire or perfect peace, but space. A spaciousness so profound that it makes room for everything: pain, joy, silence, chaos, and holds it all without resistance. You do not reach the clearing by climbing higher. You reach it by stepping out of the maze, by walking through your own thoughts until they lose their grip on you. And when you arrive, there is nothing there waiting for you. Because nothing is exactly what was missing all along. Be the bamboo, strong yet flexible. The bamboo does not fight the wind, it bends. Storms come, branches snap all around it, yet the bamboo sways and survives. It does not resist, it does not break. And when the wind passes, it rises again, unchanged at its core. This is not weakness, this is resilience. For true strength is not found in rigidity. It is found in the ability to yield without collapsing. The bamboo teaches what so many forget. You do not have to be hard to endure. You only have to know how to bend without losing yourself. In life, people are taught to stand tall, stand firm, stand proud. But sometimes, pride is brittle. Sometimes firmness curdles into stubbornness, and strength becomes a wall that cracks under pressure. The world changes. People leave. Plans fall apart. The winds of life blow hard and without warning, and those who cannot bend with grace are the first to break. The bamboo holds its ground not by resisting change, but by flowing with it. Its roots run deep, yet its body remains light. That is the balance, anchored, yet free. The strong part of you is not the part that clings. It is the part that adjusts, adapts, and realigns. The flexible heart heals faster. The open mind sees more clearly. The gentle spirit endures what force cannot. To be like the bamboo is to embrace paradox, to stand tall with humility, to be grounded yet willing to sway, to hold your shape while releasing control. And in doing so, you do not merely survive, you thrive. You become that rare kind of strength that does not shout, does not resist, does not shatter. You become the one who rises after every fall, not because you fought the wind, but because you moved with it. Do not merely study the path, walk it barefoot. There is a comfort in studying the path from a distance, reading the books, quoting the sages, speaking of stillness, mindfulness, presence. But none of it matters until your feet touch the earth. Bare, vulnerable, real. Wisdom that lingers only in the head never transforms the heart. The path is not a concept to admire. It is a terrain to feel. And the only way to feel it is to walk it barefoot. To walk it barefoot means stripping away the armor of intellectual safety. It means not merely knowing about compassion, but practicing it when it is hard. It means not merely speaking of detachment, but releasing the very thing you secretly wish to keep. It means not merely admiring courage, but standing in fear with your chest open. You cannot tiptoe through awakening. You have to bleed a little. Books will not prepare you for what the ground feels like. The stones, the heat, the mud, the cuts. That is where the lessons live. Not in the theory, but in the pain and the grace of direct experience. It is humbling. It is messy, but it is true. And the earth responds differently when you meet it without shoes, without ego, without the buffer of always trying to look wise. So many linger at the edges, talking, planning, postponing. But the path does not begin until you take the first barefoot step. No guarantees, no map, only presence, only breath, only the next step felt fully. That is when the journey begins to shape you, not merely your ideas about it. To walk it barefoot is to let the path mark you. To let the wind change your pace. To let silence become your teacher. And in the end, the dust upon your skin will tell the story. Not the words you memorized, but the miles you surrendered to with your whole, unguarded self. The owl teaches. See through the dark and speak only when needed. The owl moves through the night with a presence so silent it becomes part of the darkness itself. It sees what others miss, shadows within shadows, the faintest flicker of movement in the stillest air. It does not panic in the unknown. It does not wait for light to show the way. It trusts a vision sharpened not by brightness, but by patience. The owl teaches that clarity is not about more light. It is about deeper seeing. While others stumble, noise-filled and blind, the owl observes, watches, listens for what is not being said. It feels the tension no one names. It is not fooled by appearances. It does not rush to react. And when at last it does speak, its call is brief, measured, meaningful. The owl does not fill the night with chatter. It knows that silence often carries more truth than words ever could. Human beings often do the opposite. They fear the dark inside themselves and inside others. They fill the silence with noise, explanations, defenses. But the owl reminds us that darkness is not the enemy. It is the proving ground of wisdom. To see in the dark is to trust your inner sight, to feel your way without needing constant assurance, and to speak only when needed is to honor the weight of words. The wise are not those who know the most, but those who see clearly in uncertainty and speak only when their voice brings light. The owl does not dominate the forest. It inhabits it with grace. It claims no spotlight, yet commands deep respect. To live like the owl is to cultivate quiet confidence, to observe before reacting, to see what lies beneath the surface, and to understand that sometimes the most powerful thing you can do is to say nothing at all. Joy does not shout. Joy whispers. Real joy does not arrive with a trumpet. It does not crash through the door or demand to be seen. It slips in quietly, often unnoticed at first, settling in the curve of a smile, in the warmth of morning light, in the stillness after a long exhale. Joy whispers, and unless the noise inside you softens, you will miss it entirely. Most people go searching for joy in the grand, the loud, the spectacular. They chase moments that promise fireworks, achievements, possessions, applause. Yet those bursts fade quickly, leaving behind an even deeper craving. That kind of joy is hollow, a performance, a peak that arrives hand in hand with its own collapse. True joy is quieter. It asks for nothing. It is already enough. It lives in the in-between, in the ordinary. The scent of tea, the sound of rain, the way your chest softens when you are safe. It does not beg for attention. It waits. And the moment you stop trying so hard to feel something larger, there it is. Not as a thrill, but as a soft yes rising from within. The tragedy is that most people turn up the volume on life in order to feel more, never realizing that joy has been speaking all along in the background. It cannot be forced. It can only be noticed. And once it is heard, it brings not a high, but a deep, grounded peace. The kind that does not flare, it remains. To hear joy whisper, you must be still. You must be willing to listen, not just with your ears, but with your breath, your skin, your presence. When the shouting of the world quiets, when your expectations loosen, that is when joy leans in. Not to dazzle you, but to remind you that everything you needed was never missing, only unheard. The spider trusts the strength of its web more than the approval of the wind. The spider spins without applause. Thread by thread, it builds its fragile masterpiece in silence. With no audience to cheer, no voice to validate, still, it spins. It does not wait for calm skies. It does not beg the wind to be kind. It places its faith not in the weather, but in the work. Because the spider knows storms will come, breezes will tug, the world will shake. What matters is not whether the wind approves. What matters is whether the web can hold. In a world obsessed with approval, this is rare wisdom. People build their lives as though they were asking permission. They second-guess every step, adjusting themselves to avoid disapproval, chasing reassurance as if it were oxygen. But approval is a breeze. It shifts. It passes. It was never meant to anchor anything. What holds is the web, the structure quietly woven from discipline, from truth, from self-trust. The spider does not panic when the wind rises. It does not abandon the web or blame the sky. It remains because it knows what it built. It knows the tension, the design, the patience in every strand. It does not need validation to believe in its work. And when part of the web tears, it rebuilds, quietly, precisely. Not because the world told it to, but because that is what strength does. It continues. To live like the spider is to root your confidence in what you know you have built. To find peace not in outer calm, but in inner structure. The world will never stop changing. The wind will never stop blowing. Yet when you trust your web, your values, your effort, your quiet resilience, you no longer need the wind to agree. You only need to keep spinning. Keep showing up, and let the wind do what it will. The spider always knew. It was never about the wind. Truth is not told. It is felt. Truth does not live in perfect sentences. It does not hide in clever arguments or in the sharp edge of logic. It does not need to be proven, explained, or defended. Because when something is true, it lands differently. It bypasses the mind and settles deep in the body. You feel it not as noise, but as stillness. Not as certainty, but as a quiet knowing that requires no permission. People try to package truth with words, to wrap it in authority, to project it through volume. But real truth resists decoration. It shows up raw, often inconvenient, sometimes without language at all. You recognize it not because someone said it beautifully, but because something inside you went silent when you heard it. No applause, no argument, only a pause, a subtle ache, or a slow breath, as though your soul nodded before your mind could catch up. And that is why truth is so easily missed in a world obsessed with performance. You can listen to 1,000 voices and still feel hollow. You can memorize the teachings of saints and still feel lost. Because truth does not stick in the head, it moves through the heart. It trembles behind your ribs. It brings tears for reasons you cannot explain. It does not inform you, it transforms you. To find truth, stop chasing perfect answers. Stop demanding clarity before you allow yourself to feel. Get quiet. Let the noise settle. Watch what remains. Watch what returns. That is where truth lives. Not in the most convincing story, but in the one that makes everything inside you go still. Truth does not arrive to impress. It arrives to reveal. And when it does, you do not need to speak it. You already are it. The root grows in darkness, yet gives life to the flower above. Beneath the surface, where no one looks, where light never touches, the root begins its silent work. It pushes through cold soil, through rock and pressure and quiet decay. It does not bloom. It does not seek attention. No one gathers to admire its beauty. But without it, the flower would never rise. The color above is born from the struggle below. The root endures the dark, not for glory, but to give life to something greater than itself. There is something sacred in this unseen labor, in the part of life that takes shape far from recognition. The root teaches that what feeds the brightest things often comes from the hardest places. The joy people see in a smile, the strength in someone's posture, the grace in their presence, these are often nourished by pain, by silence, by unseen growth. Darkness is not the opposite of life. It is where life begins. Yet so many rush toward the light, terrified of what the dark holds. They forget that the most important transformations do not happen when everything is clear. They happen in confusion, in stillness, in solitude. Like the root, we must sometimes grow downward in order to rise upward. We must find nourishment in what others flee from: grief, doubt, failure, uncertainty. The flower is fleeting. It comes and goes with the season. But the root endures. It weathers droughts, anchors against storms, and holds the memory of every winter. And even when the petals fall and the world forgets the bloom, the root remembers and begins again. To live like the root is to trust in hidden growth, to know that strength does not always shine, that sometimes the most powerful parts of us will never be seen, yet they will be felt in every leaf, in every blossom, in every quiet act of beauty we offer the world. The cow does not count its footsteps, it simply grazes. There is a quiet wisdom in the way the cow moves through the field. It does not tally the distance it has walked. It does not measure its progress or compare its path to the others. It does not ask, "Have I done enough today?" It simply grazes, step by step, mouth to grass, moment to moment, fully present in the act of living. Human beings, on the other hand, keep score. They calculate success by hours worked, steps taken, goals met, checkboxes filled. Every day becomes a race. Every breath becomes a means to an end. But in chasing forward, they lose the softness of now, the simple act of being, of enoughness without proof. The cow is not lazy. It is not unaware. It is simply content with the rhythm of existence. It follows the sun without urgency. It eats when it is hungry. It lies down when it is tired. And in doing so, it teaches a forgotten lesson, that value is not in speed or count or output. Value lies in presence. There is peace in this slowness, in letting go of the scoreboard in your head, in waking up and simply living, eating your food, washing your hands, breathing in the sky without asking whether it all adds up to something more. Life is not a ledger. You do not have to prove that you deserve to rest. You do not need to justify joy or silence or softness. The cow moves through its day without apology, and perhaps that is not foolishness. Perhaps that is freedom. The question is not how many steps you have taken. It is whether you were there for them, whether you felt the ground beneath your feet, whether you tasted the grass, whether you grazed on life with presence instead of rushing past it toward a destination that never arrives. You do not own peace. It visits those who stop chasing it. Peace is not a possession. It cannot be bought, won, or held down with clenched fists. It is not earned through control or conquered through perfection. The more you chase it, the faster it drifts, like a bird startled by sudden movement. Peace flees from the grasping hand. But when you stop running, when you stop bargaining with the moment, when you stop demanding that life be different, peace arrives quietly, unexpectedly, like sunlight spilling through a window you forgot to open. Most chase peace like a prize. They seek it in silence, in stillness, in retreats and routines. They try to earn it with effort. But peace does not respond to force. It responds to letting go. It is not found in the removal of all discomfort, but in the willingness to sit with it without needing to fix it. Peace comes not from making life calm, but from becoming calm in the middle of it. It does not ask you to become someone else. It asks you to stop becoming for a moment, to stop chasing the next solution, the next explanation, the next way to escape your own thoughts. Peace does not come when everything is figured out. It comes when you realize you do not have to figure it all out. It visits when the mind grows quiet, not because you silenced it, but because you stopped wrestling with it. It finds its way in when you stop closing all the doors in panic and finally open one in surrender. You do not own peace, because peace cannot be owned. It is not a state you conquer, it is a presence you allow. And the moment you stop chasing it as though it were somewhere else, it reveals that it was never far at all, only waiting for you to finally stop and be. The mirror does not correct the face, it only reflects it. A mirror has no agenda. It does not edit. It does not flatter. It does not distort to comfort or to condemn. It simply shows what is, exactly as it is, without commentary or correction. The mirror does not try to fix the face. It does not apply filters or soften the lines. It just reflects, quietly, honestly. And in doing so, it offers something rare in this world: unfiltered truth. But most people do not want reflection. They want reassurance. They want the mirror to lie a little, to tell them what they wish were true, to hide the parts they still cannot love. And when the mirror does not do that, they turn away. Not because the mirror failed, but because it succeeded too well. It revealed what they were not ready to see. The mind works the same way. It tries to be the mirror, but it becomes the editor. It judges, it adjusts, it explains. It masks the raw truth beneath layers of interpretation. But real awareness, real self-knowing, asks for a return to still reflection, to look without resistance, to observe without trying to control the image. The mirror does not tell you who you are. It shows you who you think you are. It gives you the chance to see clearly, to accept, to soften toward what has been hidden. And in that seeing, transformation begins. Not because the mirror changes anything, but because you do. You do not need the mirror to correct the face. You need the courage to face the reflection, to stop fixing and start witnessing. That is where healing starts. Not in the edits, but in the willingness to sit with what is, until judgment fades and truth is all that remains. An unopened eye sees only dreams. There is a difference between seeing and being awake. The unopened eye may flutter with visions, filled with color and motion, with stories that feel real, but they are not grounded. They are dreams, beautiful, haunting, sometimes profound, yet untethered from truth. Until the eye opens, what is seen is not the world. It is a reflection of the mind's own restless spinning. And no matter how vivid the dream, it dissolves in the daylight. For only the open eye can perceive what truly is. To live with eyes closed is to move through existence half asleep, guided not by presence, but by projections. Human beings dream with their eyes wide open all the time. They gaze through filters of desire, fear, memory, and expectation. They do not meet life, they interpret it. They mistake their thoughts about the world for the world itself. Yet the unopened eye does not merely miss reality, it replaces it entirely. To open the eye is not simply a matter of vision, it is an awakening. It means being willing to see clearly, even when the truth is uncomfortable, even when it shatters illusions you have clung to for years. It means releasing the dream that once kept you safe and stepping into a reality that asks more of you. Honesty, awareness, responsibility. Dreams can teach. They whisper truths in the language of metaphor. But they are not the path. They are invitations to wake. To open the eye is to see things as they are, not as you wish them to be. It is to feel the earth beneath your feet rather than drifting endlessly through imagined skies. You may learn in dreams, but you can only live with your eyes open. And sometimes, the greatest act of courage is not to dream more, but to open your eyes and remain awake. Rest like the moon, seen or unseen, always whole. The moon does not panic when it disappears. It does not rush to prove its light or to explain its darkness. It waxes. It wanes. It rests in shadow without apology. And yet, whether seen or unseen, it remains always whole, never broken, never incomplete, simply moving through phases the world does not always understand. Human beings, on the other hand, often feel they must be forever shining, always productive, always present. Rest becomes something to be earned, something shaded with guilt, something confused with failure. And when they must retreat, when their light grows dim, they fear they have lost themselves. But like the moon, nothing has truly been lost, only hidden, only resting. You are not less when you are weary. You are not broken when you need to withdraw. The moon teaches this, that pulling back is not weakness, it is rhythm. That dimming is not disappearance, it is renewal. There is a quiet power in those who know how to pause, how to honor their own need for silence, how to trust that even in stillness, they are enough. Rest like the moon. Cease performing for the sky. Let the world forget you for a while if it must. You are no less whole in the darkness. You are no less worthy when unseen. Let your cycles unfold without judgment. You are part of something ancient, something cosmic. Your energy, like moonlight, is not gone. It is merely shifting. And when the hour comes to rise again, to glow, to speak, to move, you will. Not because you forced it, but because you trusted the phase you were in. Because you remembered the truth the moon never forgets. You are always whole, even in your quietest hour. To touch the sky, bow to the earth. Ambition tells you to rise, to climb, to reach, to stretch beyond what is known. The sky becomes a symbol of greatness, of freedom, of arrival. But what ambition so often forgets is that height without grounding is fragile. A tree cannot touch the sky unless its roots bow deep into the earth. A mountain stands tall only because it rests upon something vast, unmoving, and silent beneath it. The secret is ancient and simple. To truly rise, one must first grow humble. The world glorifies ascent. Be more, gain more, display more. But in chasing the sky, many forget the soil. They lose touch with stillness, with gratitude, with the weight of the moment beneath their feet. They seek elevation, yet without reverence, and so they float but never truly grow. For the sky is not a place you conquer, it is something you align with through grounded living. To bow to the earth is to honor where you came from. It is to feel your limits not as cages, but as sacred containers. It is to slow down, to sink into humility, to recognize that every high place was once a valley. The deepest wisdom grows from kneeling, whether in prayer, in grief, or in awe. And those who bow do not shrink, they stabilize. Touching the sky is not a matter of height, it is a matter of balance. It is not a destination. It is a reflection of how deeply you have honored what supports you. Those who soar without roots are forever at risk of falling. But those who bow first, who ground themselves in truth, presence, and humility, find their rise to be steady, natural, and unstoppable. For the sky does not belong to the arrogant. It opens only to those who remember to bow. That which cannot bend will break. Rigidity may look like strength, but it is the most fragile form of power. A tree that refuses to sway in the wind will crack at its very core. A mind that cannot adjust will shatter under the weight of change. A heart that clings too tightly will rupture in disappointment. Whatever resists the flow of life, believing it can hold its shape forever, is always the first to fracture. People are taught to stand firm, to be unyielding, to draw lines that must never be crossed. They believe that to bend is to betray themselves. But life is not a statue. It is a storm, a river, a breath. It moves. And those who survive it, who grow through it, are not the ones who hold their posture at all costs, but the ones who learn to lean, to pivot, to yield with grace. To bend is not the same as to break. It is not defeat. It is resilience. It is the understanding that flexibility itself is a form of wisdom, that in moments of pain, uncertainty, or conflict, the one who can soften even just a little is the one who endures, the one who remains rooted without becoming rigid, the one who listens instead of defending, who adapts without losing their essence. Iron snaps, bamboo sways, one falls, the other survives. When you find yourself resisting, gripping, bracing for impact, ask whether it is because you are protecting your truth or simply afraid to change. Ask whether standing tall in this moment means standing alone, brittle, and blind to what is coming. Because life will ask you to bend. It will ask you to loosen the plans, the pride, the pain. And if you cannot, it will not wait. But if you can, if you let go just enough to remain intact, you will bend with the wind, not against it. And when the storm passes, you will still be standing, not despite your softness, but because of it. Compassion is strength in its gentlest form. Most people mistake strength for hardness. They imagine it as a shield, impenetrable, unmoved, cold. Compassion, by contrast, seems soft, fragile, easily wounded. Yet in reality, compassion is strength's purest expression. It takes more courage to remain gentle in a harsh world than it does to armor yourself against it. Compassion requires the deepest bravery of all, to keep the heart open even when it hurts. True compassion is not pity. It is not looking down from above, safely distant, safely removed. Compassion is standing side by side, feeling the ache of another's wound as if it were your own, without drowning in it. It is strength in vulnerability. It is the steady hand reaching out, not from superiority, but from understanding. It does not judge pain. It simply holds it. The world has convinced many that compassion is weakness, that caring too deeply makes you fragile. But compassion is not about sacrificing yourself. It is about refusing to sacrifice your humanity. It is the refusal to let bitterness define you, the refusal to let the cruelty of others shape the softness in your heart. Compassion is a quiet rebellion against cynicism. In moments of anger, it chooses to forgive. In moments of hurt, it chooses empathy. Compassion does not deny suffering. It transforms it. It sees clearly without flinching. It holds space without collapsing. And in doing so, it becomes powerful beyond measure. Anyone can turn cold, withdraw, grow numb. That is easy. But to remain kind in the face of cruelty, gentle amid violence, patient in the storm, that takes true strength. Compassion is not passive. It is fiercely alive, fiercely awake, and it heals not only the other, but the one brave enough to offer it. Even the loudest waterfall finds calm at the bottom. The waterfall's roar seems relentless, a thunderous declaration of power that drowns out everything else. Each drop crashes with intent, carving rock and demanding attention. Yet where that turbulent descent meets the riverbed, something extraordinary happens. The water's fury softens, the surface flattens, and a reflective pool emerges. What was once chaos becomes clarity. Movement becomes stillness. And the very force that seemed uncontainable surrenders to serenity. People often live like the waterfall's crest, rushing toward every deadline, every crisis, every high-intensity moment, believing that power is measured by volume and speed. But when the rush finally ends, they find themselves exhausted, their minds churning like white foam. It is only when they reach the base, when they allow themselves to settle, that they discover the hidden sanctuary below the noise, a space to heal, to reflect, and to breathe. That calm pool holds secrets the roar could never reveal. The pebbles smoothed by 1,000 tumbles, the fish gliding in gentle currents, the subtle ripples that catch the light. In the same way, our own deepest insights surface, not in the frenzy of doing, but in the hush of being. The waterfall's strength is not extinguished by the pool's stillness. It transforms into something even more profound, a mirror to the soul, showing us that true power lies in the ability to yield, to pause, and to finally rest. You are not the echo. You are the mountain that created it. An echo only repeats what it hears. It carries no origin, no substance of its own. But the mountain that made it stands strong, shaping every sound before it even begins. There is power in being the source rather than the reflection. An echo cannot choose its voice or its message. It is bound by the canyon that gave it life. The mountain, however, decides what to release and what to hold, when to let the wind carry its roar, and when to remain silent. Too often, people live as echoes, reflecting opinions, fears, expectations picked up from others. Words land in the canyon of the heart and return as certainty, doubt, or self-judgment. Yet they are not truly one's own. In that echo chamber, identity erodes. The mind becomes a hollow mirror shaped by outside forces. But the mountain within each person remembers its own ground. It knows the bedrock of values, the contours of authentic desire, the quiet conviction that precedes any voice. To be the mountain means choosing carefully what to amplify. It means sensing which thoughts deserve passage and which should stay lodged in the rock. It means understanding that not every shout needs to be thrown back into the world. Strength is not measured by how loudly an echo resounds, but by how deeply the source shapes the valley of the soul. A mountain silent in its grandeur carries more presence than echoes screaming for attention. When storms howl and echoes tremble, the mountain stands. When winds shift direction and echoes scatter, the mountain endures. And when inner chaos threatens to repeat old patterns, the mountain's core remains unmoved, anchored in purpose. In truth, in the certainty that echoes may fade, the source persists without apology. In learning to stand as the mountain, the voices that return become guides, not shackles, and the world hears at last an originality no echo could ever match. Let sorrow pass through, not take root. Sorrow can arrive like a sudden storm, drenching every corner of the heart in cold regret, in aching loss. At first, its weight feels impossible to carry, each breath a reminder of what was lost, or of what never was. But sorrow is like rainwater falling upon thirsty soil. If you allow it to pool and stagnate, it invites the weeds of bitterness, regret, and resentment to take root. Yet if you allow it to flow, to be absorbed, filtered, and released, it nourishes empathy, resilience, and wisdom rather than choking the spirit. When sorrow finds its way in, the instinct is often to hide from it, to seal ourselves off until the ache disappears. But walls built around grief only trap it there, giving it the time and the space to deepen its roots. The secret is not to resist the feeling, but to feel with intention, to let sorrow trickle through your awareness, to acknowledge its cold touch, and then to let it wash onward. Like a river carving out canyons, sorrow shapes us most when it moves, not when it stagnates. Notice how tears cleanse more than they mourn, how remembering gently can honor pain without inviting it to linger. Allow the waters of sorrow to carry away what must be carried away, rather than damming them up until they erode your foundations. This is not avoidance, it is stewardship of the heart. It is the recognition that grief has a purpose, but not a permanent home. When sorrow moves through you, instead of settling within you, it leaves behind a quieter strength, a tenderness that reaches deeper than before. And in that soft aftermath, you discover that life continues not in spite of sorrow, but because you refuse to let it take root. The sacred is not far. It hides within the ordinary moments. The sunrise does not wait for a ceremony. The first bird does not need a stage. The sacred arrives in the steam that curls from your morning cup, in the laughter spilling between friends, in the pause when you catch your own reflection in a passing window. It does not dwell behind temple walls, nor within rarefied rites. It lives within the heartbeat of the mundane, waiting for someone to notice. People spend whole lifetimes chasing awe, climbing peaks, crossing deserts, seeking visions, forgetting that wonder is available in the quiet crack of a door, in the warmth of sunlight upon a scarred hand, in the way a child's question can crack open a closed mind. Those ordinary moments are not background noise, they are the doorway itself. But the mind, busy with lists of tasks and looming deadlines, often walks past without bowing, without kneeling, without whispering, "This is holy." To see the sacred within the ordinary requires an unlearning of urgency. It demands a slowing just enough to feel the weight of a leaf drifting toward the ground, to hear the soft echo of rain against a tin roof, to taste the sweetness within a tear released after too long a silence. In those breaths between tasks, behind the veil of habit, everything you were told was trivial becomes profound. This is not a teaching reserved for mystics alone. It is the invitation of your own life. calling you to recognize that you have been walking through a tapestry of miracles stitched into the everyday. The sacred does not require mists of incense, nor chants in distant tongues. It simply asks you to tilt your head, to soften your eyes, and to remember that every moment, however small, carries the weight of wonder. Truth does not need defenders, it endures. Truth stands by its own nature like a mountain in a storm. It is not shouted, it simply is. When lies rally their armies, angry voices, frantic protests, desperate logic, they swarm around it, trying to bury it in noise. But truth does not tremble at the onslaught. It is not a soldier marching, brandishing sword and shield. It is the silent bedrock beneath every battle, the still water that reflects each falsehood until they crack upon its surface. Attempts to defend the truth aggressively often backfire. They transform honesty into rhetoric, clarity into conflict, and devotion into arrogance. Yet the true word, the clear fact, the pure insight, unchanged by time, untarnished by circumstance, persists beyond the din, beyond the era, beyond the passing moment. Those who rush to guard truth sometimes betray its power, turning defense into siege. They erect barriers, draw lines, brand dissenters as traitors, while the genuine truth quietly outlasts fear, hostility, and prejudice. It resonates within moments of unexpected recognition, within the pause when a falsehood collapses under its own weight. You do not protect truth by raising your voice. You honor it by living it, by speaking it when it matters, by showing up when silence is louder than lies. And when the noise finally fades, the truth remains, untouched by all that tried to contain it. Kindness is the language that even silence understands. Kindness speaks without sound. It reaches across barriers stronger than any argument, deeper than words can plumb. A gentle gesture, holding open a door, offering a smile to a stranger, listening without agenda, carries a meaning that transcends speech. Silence itself leans in to receive it, for in that moment, kindness fills the empty space with warmth and recognition, reminding us we are not alone. When life feels heavy, words often fail. They stumble over grief, collapse beneath guilt, or ring hollow against the roar of pain. But kindness does not need eloquence, it needs only presence. It is the hand laid lightly upon a shoulder, the quiet offer of water, the patient glance that says, "I see you." In those acts, silence is transformed, no longer a void, but a cradle for connection. Remarkable things happen when kindness moves through silence. A heart tight with worry unfolds, a wounded spirit breathes, and even within ourselves, the simple act of self-kindness, pausing to rest, speaking gently within the mind, forgiving a misstep, speaks volumes. It heals the crack inside us that words alone cannot reach. Compassion seeps into the corners, dissolving shame and inviting the soul to remember its own worth. Kindness demands nothing. It is not bargaining for favor, nor building a ledger of good deeds. It is offered freely, aware that its impact may bloom unseen. And yet those unseen ripples alter the world. A small kindness can dissolve anger, bridge isolation, awaken hope. In its quiet force, it reminds us that we share this space together, and that respect and care are the true currency of human bonds. Even in the deepest silence, where sorrow or fear has stolen the voice, kindness whispers hope. It does not shout solutions or insist on understanding. It simply reaches out, steady and soft, trusting that the gentlest touch can awaken what words could never stir. And in that gentle exchange, the silence itself learns to speak once more. Let go of the rope, and the knot will loosen. When you clutch the rope with desperate strength, the knot only tightens. Every tug, every pull reinforces the entanglement. Your fear, your anger, your anxiety, until you are trapped in your own grip. Yet the ancient insight reminds us that struggle often deepens the wound. It is in release, not in force, that freedom begins. Letting go of the rope does not mean denying that the knot exists. It means trusting that the tension will ease when you stop feeding its pull. Imagine a coil of threads so knotted that every attempt to pry them apart only seals them tighter. The same is true of the mind, clinging to worry, replaying the same memories, fighting the feelings you fear. You become the prison guard and the prisoner at once, tightening the very bars that hold you. The rope becomes both your weapon and your cage. And yet, the moment you relax your hold, the knot loosens beneath your gentle touch, as if it had only been waiting for permission to unwind. This is not weakness, it is wisdom. It takes courage to face the knot without wrestling it, to step back, to breathe, and to acknowledge that control is an illusion. You come to see that strength does not arise from resisting the tangle, but from surrendering the illusion of power over it. In that pause, a subtle shift occurs. The tension begins to dissolve. The pattern unravels, and what seemed impossible starts to give way. When you let go, you are not abandoning the struggle. You are transforming it. You create space for clarity, for insight, for healing. The knot does not disappear overnight, but with each moment of non-resistance, it loosens its hold. And in that gentleness, you discover something profound. Release is not defeat, but the gateway to true mastery over the entanglements you once believed inescapable. With you was Damian Blackwood. Until we meet again on the channel The Dark Mind. If these words touch something quiet within you, please subscribe and leave a like.